what is the worst episode of SpongeBob SquarePants? There are boring ones, cruel ones, gross ones, episodes where the writers clearly had a joke and forgot to build an episode around it. So instead of trying to crown one winner out of 19 seasons of material, which would mostly just be me picking whichever episode personally offended me the hardest, I'm doing this season by season, one pick per season, for every episode where I think something in the core of the episode actually shits on, not just the one that grossed me out the most or the one Twitter already agreed on. Some of these are going to be obvious. A few of them, I promise you, are going to be picks I had to fight myself over. Two of them I couldn't even lock until I'd seen how the seasons around them played out. Before we get into it though, I need to explain what I actually mean by worst, because it's carrying more weight than you'd think. But quick note, for one, worst doesn't always mean grossest. It doesn't mean meanest. Those get their own videos. What I'm actually looking for, season by season, is the episode where something breaks. Something that's structural. The story runs out of ideas before the runtime does. Sometimes it's a character's whole internal logic collapsing so a joke can happen. Sometimes it's the show inventing a bad habit it's going to keep repeating for years. So a few things won't make this list even if you're expecting them. Purely gross episodes don't count on their own. Gross isn't broken, it's just unpleasant. Genuinely cruel episodes don't automatically win either, if the cruelty is at least internally consistent. That's a different failure than an episode that doesn't know what it's doing. And boring only counts if the boredom comes from something actually going wrong in the writing, not just a slow episode having an off week. Now, what I'm chasing is the moment where you can point at the screen and say, that's the part that doesn't work. And here's why. 19 seasons of it. Let's get into it. First off, with season 1, the easy pick here is I Was a Teenage Gary. SpongeBob gets injected with snail plasma. His eyes stretch out of his head, his arms and legs fall off one at a time, and the episode ends with him meowing show tunes on a fence next to Squidward. Now, if you're building a case for the worst season 1 episode, that's a perfectly reasonable argument. But that episode knows exactly what it's doing. The unsettling stuff is the point. My pick is Nature Pants, and it's not for the reason most people give. The SpongeBob is out of character complaint doesn't fully hold up. This is season 1. His character wasn't fully established yet. The actual problem is simpler. The episode runs out of story in the first 2 minutes. SpongeBob decides to live with the jellyfish. He goes to jellyfish fields, he gets stung, Patrick tries to catch him like a trophy. More stinging, sea urchins, he goes home. That's the whole middle section. There's no escalation, no complication, nothing interesting happens in Jellyfish Fields. The premise exhausts itself before the cold open is over, and the episode just waits for its runtime to end. Even Squidward saw it coming. Season 1 running out of story is one kind of problem. Season 2 has the opposite one. Too much story, none of it adding up. Most people go with dumped for season 2 worst, which is a fair argument. Patrick shows zero sympathy for SpongeBob losing Gary. The show plays the Moonlight Sonata over a snail chasing a cookie, and Gary leaves his owner of multiple seasons because of something in Patrick's pocket. The Moonlight Sonata specifically. Beethoven wrote that for A Lost Love. Nickelodeon used it for A Snail's Appetite. One of these is more historically significant than the other, but dumped is a broken meal that at least arrives on a plate. It has a beginning, middle, and end. Patrick gets his comeuppance when Gary leaves him. The emotional loop closes. Now, I'm With Stupid is a structurally broken episode. SpongeBob agrees to pretend to be stupid so Patrick looks smarter for his parents. Patrick forgets that this is pretend. not maliciously, he's just too dumb to hold an agreement for 5 minutes ago in his head, and spends the rest of the episode genuinely treating SpongeBob like he's beneath him. Nobody calls this out, and Patrick gets a happy ending. And then the twist. Janet and Marty weren't even Patrick's real parents. Two strangers with the wrong house, meaning SpongeBob humiliated himself for nothing. Not dramatically nothing, literally nothing. There was no situation to solve in the first place. The show moves on. No apology, no recognition, just credits. That's not a bad episode. That's a broken one. That one broke because the premise turned out to be nothing. Season 3's pick breaks for the opposite reason. The premise is real, and that's what makes it hurt. The easy pick for Season 3 is the sponge who could fly. The townspeople mourn SpongeBob's pants more than SpongeBob himself, and that sounds damning, until you remember that Bikini Bottomites have always been exactly this way. That's not Season 3 failing, that's the show being internally consistent about who those people are. My pick is the Great Snail Race. SpongeBob enters Gary in a snail race against Squidward's purebred, trains him so aggressively that Gary's eyes literally inflate and explode on the track, and the episode frames this as a lesson about being too competitive. Here's the specific thing nobody isolates about this episode. SpongeBob's relationship with Gary is the one relationship in the show that's supposed to be unconditionally loving. Gary has never done anything to SpongeBob that would justify what happens to him here, and the lesson only lands because the show puts Gary through something genuinely awful to earn it. The moral is real, but the price Gary pays for SpongeBob to learn it is too high. The Great Snail Race is a better version of a mistake the show would keep repeating. At least SpongeBob apologizes here. Later seasons won't bother, and here's where I have to stop picking one episode and start picking a fight with myself instead. Now, the easy pick for Season 4 is All That Glitters. SpongeBob's spatula breaks. He replaces it, and the show treats the replacement like an affair, complete with a hospital visit and a tearful "it was a moment of weakness." SpongeBob cries for the entire runtime over solving a practical problem. It's a decent case for worst, and it's the first time the show's SpongeBob as crybaby instinct shows up at full volume. But Good Neighbors for me is Season 4's real failure, because it's the episode where the show invents something it will keep using for the rest of its run. SpongeBob and Patrick ruin the one Sunday Squidward has off, a security system malfunction that's their fault, not his. The fallout lands entirely on Squidward. He's sentenced to community service every Sunday for the rest of his life for something he didn't do. SpongeBob and Patrick face nothing. The ending plays it as a happy resolution, SpongeBob's version of a good deed. Nobody in the episode is being deliberately cruel yet. That's what makes it worth flagging. This is the show stumbling into the mechanism by accident. Punishment with no karmic logic, aimed at Squidward, framed from the other side as a win. It doesn't know yet what it's built. 2 seasons later, it will. Good Neighbors didn't know what it had built yet. Season 5 isn't about a mechanism at all. It's about the show reaching for something it clearly didn't think all the way through. Now, Season 5 has options. Whatever happened to SpongeBob is the meanest of the bunch. His friends call him Idiot Boy, run him out of town, and the show resets at the end like nothing happened. Decent candidate, but To Love a Patty exists. So we need to talk about To Love a Patty. SpongeBob falls in love with a Krabby Patty, names it, takes it on a date, sings it a song, murders a group of scallops to defend it, then eats it after it's visibly rotting. Whew. I mean, the legendary Gordon Ramsay has always described food as beautiful, perfect, or saying something like, "I'm in love with this dish," on camera more times than anyone has counted. The difference between Gordon Ramsay and SpongeBob in this episode is that Gordon Ramsay doesn't kill anything to protect the risotto. I also found some coincidences that I thought were pretty funny. Ratatouille came out in 2007, same year as To Love a Patty. One of these is a Pixar film about the sacred relationship between a chef and their craft. The other is SpongeBob watching a scallop's jaw get ripped off. same year, different choices, but the actual damage isn't the gross out. It's that SpongeBob's love of Krabby Patties has always been the cleanest thing about him. Pride of a craftsman, uncomplicated and pure. To love a patty takes that and makes it weird. Retroactively, every previous scene of SpongeBob lovingly flipping a patty now has a question mark sitting next to it. And the show's moral at the end, Krabby Patties are meant to be loved and eaten, is the writers patting themselves on the back for an episode they clearly didn't think through. That one's a swing and a miss on a single episode. Season 6 is the show picking up a bad habit on purpose. The easy pick for Season 6 is the Splinter. 11 minutes of a Splinter getting progressively more disgusting, while Patrick makes it worse. Tom Kenny has named it his least favorite episode he's ever recorded, and it's the episode that launched Mr. Enter's entire animated atrocities series. That's a real legacy, but it's a gross out problem, not a structural one. The episode isn't broken, it's just unpleasant to sit through. Choir Boys is the one that matters, because it's the same mechanism from Good Neighbors, except now the show knows what it's doing. SpongeBob follows Squidward to a choir audition and sabotages him, repeatedly on purpose. The line that gives it away, "What a lucky break. Now I have a captive audience." That's not an accident anymore. That's SpongeBob fully aware he's got Squidward trapped and pleased about it. The Figaro gag runs 32 times across the runtime, in case the point wasn't already made. Good Neighbors invented the template without knowing it. Choir Boys is the moment the show picks that template up on purpose and starts using it as a personality trait. It's also the version that keeps coming back. Season 9 does it again in Little Yellow Book. Season 11 does it again in Ink Lemonade. And one reviewer calls that episode out by name as literally a return to Season 6. That's not a coincidence. That's the show relapsing into a specific failure mode it invented right here. Once a show learns a character can be humiliated without consequence, it doesn't forget that lesson. Season 7 is what happens when that lesson becomes the whole personality. One Course Meal is the morally worse episode. Mr. Krabs dresses as Pearl for 16 straight days to psychologically torture Plankton until he lies down in traffic to be run over. In a kid's cartoon, played for laughs. If you want to argue that that's Season 7's worst, I won't tell you you're wrong, but A Pal for Gary is Season 7's most broken episode. And there's a difference. The episode is a Gremlins parody. SpongeBob is warned by the shop owner not to mix Puffy Fluffy with other pets. He ignores the warning, brings Puffy Fluffy home, and Puffy Fluffy immediately begins trying to eat Gary. Gremlins works because the humans make one mistake and spend the rest of the film paying for it. A Pal for Gary doesn't work because SpongeBob never pays for anything. He watches Puffy Fluffy attack Gary and scolds Gary for not playing nicely. He wakes up to find his house destroyed and assumes Gary did it. He walks into a room, sees Puffy Fluffy in the process of eating Gary alive, and tells Gary to put Puffy down. Gary saves SpongeBob's life. SpongeBob still blames Gary. Some people have been comparing Gary abuse episodes across the show. One user puts it plainly, at least SpongeBob felt bad in The Great Snail Race. In A Pal for Gary, he doesn't even feel bad. That's the whole problem. The Great Snail Race puts Gary through something terrible and has SpongeBob recognize what he did. A Pal for Gary puts Gary through something terrible and has SpongeBob wrong about it in the final scene. One Course Meal is Mr. Krabs at his worst. A Pal for Gary is SpongeBob at his worst. SpongeBob is the center of the show. When he goes, the whole thing goes with him. SpongeBob losing all self-awareness is bad enough. Season 8 finds a way to do the same thing to someone who's supposed to be the adult in the room. Now, I think a lot of people would go with face freeze here. 11 minutes of SpongeBob and Patrick making stupid faces while the show waits for something to happen. It's bad. Just bad in the most boring possible way. But damn, Demolition Doofus is worse. And it's worse for a reason that's actually interesting. Mrs. Puff has wanted SpongeBob gone since Season 1. not in a villain way, more in the exhausted, deeply professional way of someone who has been genuinely wronged by the same person repeatedly for years. That's a sustainable character dynamic. Seasons 1 through 7 managed it fine. Then Demolition Doofus happens. SpongeBob pops her inflation sack in a car crash. She can't puff anymore, permanently. And Mrs. Puff's response is to enter him into a demolition derby to get him killed. Her line, delivered in total seriousness,
"Why are you still alive?"
And then at the end, she puffs back up. Crash into the school, credits. Everything is back to normal. The show spent a decade of Mrs. Puff's character arc, a decade of justified frustration building towards something, and burned it in 11 minutes, then put everything back in the drawer. For reference, Nickelodeon's own book adaptation toned it down. In the book, she just wants to scare him, not kill him. The show went further than its own merchandise division was comfortable with. The same network that pulled Quarantined Crab for pandemic sensitivity had no problem with a teacher trying to murder her student. That one burns a decade of character work in 11 minutes. Season 9 burns something smaller, a premise it already used twice, better years earlier. The obvious pick here is Little Yellow Book. Squidward reads SpongeBob's diary to the whole Krusty Krab. SpongeBob runs away crying. The townspeople who were laughing along with him turn around and shame him for it while facing zero consequences. Squidward even points out that Patrick read the diary too. Patrick dismisses this, then Squidward apologizes. SpongeBob forgives him, and Squidward immediately reads his real diary. SpongeBob runs away crying again. Credits! The structural hypocrisy of Little Yellow Book is genuinely impressive in a bad way. Also, it accidentally produced the mocking SpongeBob meme. The chicken dance scene is funny, that's enough to disqualify it from worst of anything. But I have to go with SpongeBob You're Fired. Mr. Krabs fires SpongeBob to save a nickel. The show has established across multiple seasons that SpongeBob is the only reason Mr. Krabs makes money. Without him, the Krusty Krab collapses inside a week. The premise has no legs, and you can feel it in the first 30 seconds. Then it runs for 22 minutes. SpongeBob crying, SpongeBob going to other restaurants, SpongeBob getting fired at those restaurants, SpongeBob getting kidnapped, a giant Krabby Patty saving him. Back to the Krusty Krab, credits. The show already did SpongeBob Gets Fired from the Krusty Krab better in Karate Choppers and Squid on Strike, both at the standard 11-minute runtime, both with something to actually say. Running the same premise again as a double-length special at the tail end of Season 9A with nothing new and twice the time to not say it is what Season 9A failing looks like at its most concentrated. And then for one season, almost nothing breaks at all. Okay, I think I need to say that Season 10 doesn't really have a terrible episode, or at least that's what I think of this season. The show was recovering. Hillenburg was back. Season 10 isn't brilliant. It's a bit uneven, a bit forgettable, but nothing in it reaches the lows of what came before. The failure mode here isn't cruelty or gross out or broken structural logic. It's a season that occasionally had interesting premises and didn't fully develop them. The closest thing to a worst episode is Out of the Picture. Mr. Krabs tries to get Squidward killed so his paintings become more valuable as a dead artist's work. That's a premise dark enough to feel like it wandered in from Season 8. But even this one doesn't fully break the way Demolition Doofus does. It's a lazy, dark joke rather than an episode that burns a character's entire arc and resets. So for Season 10, Out of the Picture is my pick by default. But the more honest thing to say about this season is that its failure mode is forgettability. The ceiling was rising again. That's worth saying. which makes what happens in Season 11 sting more than it should. Season 11 is generally considered one of the best post-movie seasons. Mr. Enter, the person who built his entire critical platform reviewing bad SpongeBob episodes, called it his favorite season of the whole show. And then there's Ink Lemonade. Patrick sets up a lemonade stand. Business is bad. He figures out that deliberately terrifying Squidward causes Squidward to produce nose ink. He bottles the ink and sells it as lemonade. SpongeBob helps. Neither of them acknowledges at any point that what they're doing is wrong. Squidward just suffers. No resolution. Some people even felt like this is literally a return to Season 6, which is exactly the problem. Ink Lemonade doesn't feel like a Season 11 episode. It feels like it was produced during the Dark Age and accidentally shipped 3 years late. Patrick deliberately terrorizing Squidward for profit with no consequences is the exact failure mode the show had spent seasons 9, 10, and 11 recovering from. The episode existing in Season 11, in my opinion, is the failure. Not just the episode itself. The fact that it's here in this season after everything the show did to earn its way back. But what do you think? Would you agree? Ink Lemonade is the Dark Age sneaking back in on purpose, but Season 12's problem is dumber than that. It's not cruelty coming back, it's the show forgetting what a joke is. Season 12 is a decent recovery season. The failure mode here isn't cruelty, it's chaos. Patrick recruits SpongeBob into the Empty Head Society. SpongeBob has to remove his brain to join. The Empty Head Society then wanders around Bikini Bottom being randomly destructive. SpongeBob drinks a jar of spit. Nobody is trying to torture anyone. The episode is just loud and random and kind of gross for no particular reason. The early show had surreal logic. The absurdity followed rules you could feel even if you couldn't articulate them. Chocolate with nuts is surreal. Rockabye Bivalve is surreal. The nitwitting is surrealism without rules, which isn't the same thing. Confusing chaos for comedy is Season 12's specific failure mode, and this is the purest expression of it. Qualitapedia compared it directly to Ink Lemonade. Both have Patrick acting like he wandered in from Season 6 or 7, but they're actually different kinds of bad. Ink Lemonade is the Dark Age accidentally shipping late. The nitwitting is the show forgetting that randomness isn't a substitute for a joke. Now, the easy pick for Season 13 is Squidward, which fans have already clocked as a beat-for-beat rerun of a Season 6 or 7 plot. Fair complaint, but at least it commits to being its own bad episode. Plain to See does something worse. It doesn't borrow a mechanism. It borrows 3 specific episodes and doesn't hide the receipts. SpongeBob and Patrick take Squidward on what he thinks is a resort trip. On the plane, they strap him down, pour hot coffee in his mouth, and lose both flight attendants and both pilots out the emergency exit, leaving Squidward to accidentally land a plane he didn't know was on autopilot the whole time. Then SpongeBob reveals the trip was only ever to see the resort, not stay at it. The plane turns around before Squidward can get off. If that feels familiar, Squidward goes somewhere nice and it gets ruined is smooth jazz at Bikini Bottom. Squidward punished for nothing, while everyone cheers is good neighbors. Reportedly, even the autopilot twist is a repeat of a gag from Nautical Novice, just swapping in a boat for a plane. Good Neighbors invented the mechanism by accident. Choir Boys picked it up on purpose. Ink Lemonade proved the show would relapse into it years later. Plain to See is that mechanism running out of new places to point itself. So it points at 3 earlier episodes at once and bets nobody's counting. Some fans count it anyway. The easy pick is Momageddon, mostly on the strength of one line. SpongeBob explains his mom's cooking takes forever because she adds love. which is a rough 5 seconds for a character built around loving his job unconditionally. But pull that line and the episode mostly still works. One bad line isn't a broken episode. But Sponge Chovy is broken at the premise level. Anchovies flood the Krusty Krab and, through unexplained contact, start turning Bikini Bottom into faux chovies. Meeping personality gone. SpongeBob catches it almost instantly. Patrick, standing next to him the whole time, doesn't. The show never explains what triggers the change or why it skips him. A contagion premise doesn't work without rules for the contagion. It saves the cruelest beat for last. After spending the whole episode trying to escape the chaos, Squidward gets swept onto the anchovy bus in the final shot and turns to, crying as the picture irises shut on his eyes. Played for a dark laugh. But the premise never earned that ending, because the premise never had internal logic to begin with. Season 7 broke by being cruel on purpose. This one broke by inventing a monster and never writing down what it does. Sponge Chovy invents a rule and breaks it by the end. Season 15's problem is that it stops inventing anything. It starts lifting whole endings. The easy pick is A Taste of Plankton, widely agreed to be gross with a wasted premise. But gross with wasted potential is a Season 5 problem, not a broken one. Now, stuck in an elevator is the clear sign the wells run dry. Squidward gets trapped in an elevator with SpongeBob and Patrick on his way to return a library book. Patrick shorts the controls. Squidward eventually hallucinates himself as a king, and 30 seconds after the book comes due, gets hauled off to library jail. That ending, Squidward carted off over something technical, is reportedly the same closing beat as good ol' what's-his-name, a Season 5 episode, just swapped from truancy to an overdue book. 10 seasons apart, same finish. Plain to See hid its recycling under a new setting. Stuck in an elevator doesn't bother. It reuses the actual ending. Season 15 recycles an old ending outright, but Season 16 recycles a whole episode. The easy pick is the green tentacle. Squidward's gardening advice is useless, and the actual fix comes from Sandy noticing she parked on the tree's roots. Frustrating, but Squidward being a confidently wrong know-it-all is exactly his established character. That's consistency, not a break. Happy Krabby Birthday is a needless remake. SpongeBob wants to get Mr. Krabs a present against his wishes. Squidward tags along to stop him from doing something stupid. Chaos happens in a store. It resolves on a predictable money-related reveal. This is reportedly the same structural beat as The Lost Mattress. And true to form, Squidward ends the episode with his pay docked for damage that was entirely SpongeBob's fault. SpongeBob faces nothing. Good Neighbors invented this by accident in Season 4. Choir Boys did it on purpose in Season 6. Ink Lemonade proved the show would relapse into it in Season 11. Plain to See recycled it in Season 13. Happy Krabby Birthday is the same mechanism, punishing the same character 16 seasons after the show first stumbled into it. At this point, it isn't a relapse, it's a house style. 19 seasons in, and for the first time, one of them doesn't get a verdict. Honestly, I kind of love that. If you want to see the flip side of this, what happens when this show actually swings for something different instead of running the same play a fourth time?
I tried to find the most normal SpongeBob episode from every season. Not the funniest, not the most iconic, just the most painfully average. The one makes you think, yep, that could happen in real life episode. And let me tell you, this was a nightmare, like trying to find a salad at Taco Bell. Technically possible, but spiritually, no. This show is 50% chaos, 30% unhinged comedy, and 20% screaming. It's weird. It's bizarre. It makes zero sense. And unironically, that's the real reason why we love it. But today, we're doing the impossible. We're digging through 14 plus seasons of sea madness to find the few rare normal moments. Believe it or not, it gets weirder before it gets normal. Let's start with the beginning, the most normal season of SpongeBob. Out of the first 20 episodes of SpongeBob, Employee of the Month is practically the most normal. This episode is literally just two co-workers fighting over a meaningless title and slowly unraveling into sleep-deprived lunatics. So yes, extremely relatable. And look, this is basically your average office rivalry. It's the SpongeBob version of that one dude who sends Slack messages at 3 a.m. trying to impress the boss. And for once, the world isn't ending. There's no jellyfish revolution, no gigantic monster attacking the city. Just two employees beefing over a plastic plaque that probably smells like grease and disappointment. Still has cartoon antics, but this episode could honestly happen at a Wendy's. Also, shout out to Squidward for being so done with SpongeBob that he's willing to set his house on fire just to win. Normal behavior? Absolutely not. Relatable behavior? Sadly, yes. The other one I could think of is Boating School. This episode is built around a very simple, normal concept. SpongeBob wants to pass his driving test. That's it. No multiverse, no freaky fish cult, just one sponge, one boat. We've got Mrs. Puff, the human embodiment of every exhausted teacher ever, trying to get this overachieving maniac to chill out enough to operate a vehicle. You've got Patrick, playing the role of the bad idea friend, literally feeding SpongeBob lines through a walkie-talkie, and surprise, it goes off the rail. But compared to the rest of the season, like say SB 129, where Squidward travels through time and space and ends up in a void of existential horror, those two episodes are a cozy little slice of life sitcom. This is SpongeBob with training wheels on. It's still goofy, but there's structure, there's logic, a bit of cartoon madness, sure, but it's still the kind of weird you could explain to your mom. And that won't last long. For Season 2, we have Squid's Day Off. The episode is quite straightforward. Mr. Krabs yeets himself into a coma over a penny, so he leaves Squidward in charge of the Krusty Krab. Sounds normal, right? Now, Squidward does what any of us would do given a little bit of power and a lot of SpongeBob. He dips. But every time he tries to relax, his overactive brain kicks in like, hey, what if SpongeBob just burned the entire restaurant down because he couldn't find the pickles? This episode is literally just anxiety. It's Squidward spiraling into paranoid delusions about SpongeBob ruining everything. And like, who can't relate? That's not even a SpongeBob plot. That feels like a real day in retail hell. Also, the scene where Squidward runs across Bikini Bottom in a bathrobe like a man freshly released from the asylum? Emmy-worthy. Any better options? Technically, Big Pink Loser is a contender. It's about Patrick trying to get his life together by copying SpongeBob. Again, relatable, it's a midlife crisis in starfish form. But Patrick literally glues a Krusty Krab to his forehead, so there goes that. Your shoes untied? Nah, we watched SpongeBob forget how to use his feet. For 7 minutes, the stakes are socks. So yeah, Squid's Day Off are your best bets for Season 2 sanity. And this is where it hit me personally. This show isn't just weird, it's somehow psychological. This isn't about frying patties anymore. It's about mental collapse, paranoia, and SpongeBob being one misplaced pickle away from burning the world down. This is clearly not normal, at least for a kid's show. But then again, it still feels a lot more normal compared to Season 3. Okay, so now we hit Season 3, and this is where SpongeBob stops pretending to be a kid's show and starts having a mental breakdown. This season starts with goofy chaos, like in Chocolate with Nuts. SpongeBob and Patrick decide to get rich by becoming door-to-door salesmen. Seems innocent, right? Until they start scamming people with pyramid schemes. It's weird, but still fun. Then there's Nasty Patty, and this is where it gets dark. SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs think they've poisoned a health inspector, so naturally, they bury the body behind the restaurant. As if that is a normal solution. It's played out for laughs, obviously, but still feels dark. And just when you think it can't get more unhinged, we've got Rockabye Bivalve. The story where SpongeBob and Patrick accidentally adopt a baby clam and form a dysfunctional marriage, where SpongeBob becomes the overworked housewife and Patrick is the deadbeat dad watching TV. They argue, they cry, but in the end, they stay together for the clam. It's not even a parody, it's just a marital drama in fish animation. So yeah, finding a normal episode in this pile of chaos? Pretty rough. But then, we find a little time capsule called the Krusty Krab training video, and suddenly, things feel kind of normal again. It's literally just a mock orientation video. You've got the cheesy narrator voice, awkward graphics, and way too much enthusiasm about mopping. It's like watching a VHS tape from your parents' shed. This is an old school style video on how to flip burgers. That's it. And the most important part? No weird stuff. Like, this could pass for an actual training video, except maybe the whole POOP acronym, which stands for People Order Our Patties, obviously, and we get violently cut off before learning the Krabby Patty secret formula. But still, this thing's basically satire gold. It roasts training culture, fast food brainwashing, and SpongeBob just doing what he always does, being aggressively good at his job. And you know what? Compared to everything else in this season, this is probably the most structured, realistic episode in the whole season. Could you technically say one Krabs trash is grounded? I mean, Mr. Krabs sells junk, SpongeBob buys a cursed soda drinking hat, then a grave rubber threatens them. Okay, no, never mind. Absolutely not. Midlife crustacean, where Mr. Krabs has an existential crisis and goes on a weird guy's night out and does the infamous panty raid, which Nickelodeon later banned. So yeah, not exactly grounded, more like, this did not age well. So yeah, the Krusty Krab training video is the least insane episode in Season 3. It's the last breath of sanity before the ocean goes feral in the future. Alright, buckle up. Season 4 is where things start to feel off. The animation gets shinier, the jokes get weirder, and SpongeBob's face starts doing things faces shouldn't do. But the big reason for the chaos is caused by Steven Hillenburg stepping down from his role as the showrunner. After the SpongeBob movie, the original creator passed the torch, and the show started tasting chaos, and then decided to marry it. Now, almost every episode starts normal, until SpongeBob's face turns into a Picasso painting or someone explodes because of a sandwich. But then, like a shining beacon of semi-functionality, we got Skill Crane. The story is simple. Mr. Krabs installs a claw machine. SpongeBob gets addicted, Squidward joins in, and they both mentally collapse in real time. It's basically a Vegas cautionary tale in C form. SpongeBob becomes a claw god, and Squidward becomes a claw clown. Addiction? Check. Rage quitting? Check. Capitalism exploiting everyone? Double check. In a season where SpongeBob meets a sea wizard, Squidward gets psychologically tortured by a clarinet recital, and Plankton turns into a chubby, mind-controlling blob, Skill Crane is refreshingly simple. Addiction is bad, capitalism is worse, don't trust the claw. And yet, this is the sanest we're gonna be for a while. You'd think it couldn't get worse. Then Season 5 hits you with new digs. SpongeBob is late for work once. Just once. And instead of setting an alarm, he decides to move into the Krusty Krab. He brings his bed, his snail, his emotional baggage. He lives there now, and no one really stops him. Mr. Krabs is just thrilled someone's working overtime for free. Squidward on the verge of violence, and SpongeBob just living his best dystopian dream. This episode isn't weird because of some freaky fish magic. It's weird because it's relatable. It's a pure, unfiltered capitalism and co-worker burnout. We've come full circle. Nothing else in this season even comes close to normal in my mind. Really. There's To Love a Patty, in which SpongeBob falls in love with a Krabby Patty and goes full rom-com psycho. That's not even a metaphor. He literally dates a sandwich and has a meltdown when it starts rotting. Nope. There's Breath of Fresh Squidward, where Squidward gets electrocuted and turns into a maniacally happy zombie of himself. SpongeBob is deeply threatened by this new positivity. This one feels like an energy drink ad gone wrong. The original Fry Cook is about emotional daddy issues and the workplace inferiority complex. Weirdly grounded, but there's a guy named Jim who looks like a sentient baked potato and flips burgers like a god. So close, but still a little too extra. So yeah, compared to the rest of Season 5, this episode is like shockingly restrained. It's just a workplace sitcom plot. Mildly weird? Sure, but not SpongeBob weird. This is sitcom weird. This one could be an episode of Friends with minor adjustments. Like, very minor. And then Season 6 happens. The animation? Shiny. The close-ups? Cursed. The logic? Non-existent. And somehow, the most normal episode of the season is one literally titled Not Normal. Poetry at its finest. The plot summary for this one is that one day, SpongeBob watches a self-help video, which is already hilarious, and decides he's too weird. So he embarks on a journey of self-erasure, smoothing out every spiky edge of his bubbly nonsense to become normal. he starts acting like an actual human being. He talks normally, walks normally, and even dresses like a 1950s accountant. It's disturbing, but intentionally so. He even wears pants, like regular people's pants. That's how serious this is. Everyone around him is freaked out, and honestly, so am I. But underneath all the beige and horrifying small talk, it's a real arc. It's literally about identity, conformity, and the soul-crushing pressure to be normal. But by the end, SpongeBob realizes being boring is worse than being weird. And thank God, because if I had to watch another scene of him talking like a walking TED Talk, I might have snapped too. It's a relatable arc. It's a story about fitting in versus being yourself. That's like textbook grounded sitcom energy. Sure, it's got exaggerated visual gags and weird moments, but the core is solid. This episode wants to be not normal and fails beautifully. And you know what also fails beautifully? The following season. Oh boy, Season 7. Welcome to the nuclear waste zone of SpongeBob. The season is so cursed, even some fans talk about it like it's Voldemort. The "we don't speak of it" season. For some of you who aren't really familiar, this is the era of overused gross out. Characters acting like they've been lobotomized, and plot lines that feel like someone got dared to write SpongeBob fan fiction at 3 a.m. with some booze. And yet, somehow, some way, we need to find the most normal episode in here. Let's review our options. Starting with Greasy Buffoons. It's an episode about SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs starting a grease war with Plankton. Ends in fire and clogged arteries. Funny, but still gross, and lots of chaos. Maybe One Course Meal, where Mr. Krabs weaponizes Plankton's phobia to the point of suicide ideation. Whoa, okay, chill. Growth Spout, in which Pearl turns into a kaiju because she's hungry? Definitely not normal. What about Buried in Time? They accidentally bury themselves alive for fun. Yeah, no. Oh, what about this one? Tentacle Vision, the episode about a local TV show and nothing explodes? We'll take it. The plot is about Squidward starting a public access TV show from his house, but SpongeBob and Patrick immediately ruin it with their usual brand of help.
It's heavy.
Classic. That's it. That's the plot. Just a wannabe influencer and two loud neighbors. Even Krabs shows up and doesn't commit tax fraud. Just tries to sell ads. For this season, that's a miracle. Tentacle Vision wins by default and by bare minimum effort. And just when you think it couldn't get any more off the rails, Season 8 shows up wearing a suit, trying to convince you like everything's fine. The animation looks a little cleaner. The pacing feels a bit more slow. You might even start to think, maybe the show found its balance again. Yeah, that's what they want you to think. For this season's normal, we have accidents will happen. This episode starts off extremely tame. It's about Squidward having a little workplace incident and claims he's injured. But instead of calling HR like a normal employee, he just decides to fake an injury for free labor. This is literally a plot from every workplace comedy in the early 2000s. So naturally, SpongeBob becomes a one-man restaurant robot doing literally everything while Squidward lounges in a body cast eating bonbons. If you've ever worked retail or food service, this episode is like watching a documentary. You've got SpongeBob turning into a human stress ball trying to handle everything at once, relatable. Mr. Krabs panicking that he's going to lose money over an insurance claim, on brand. Squidward faking an injury to avoid working. Honestly, genius. It's grounded, it's corporate, it's relatable. But the same cannot be said for the rest of the season, such as Face Freeze, where everyone makes silly faces until their bodies lock up like a cursed emoji. And let's not forget, Bubble Buddy returns. Yep, he comes back, and brings a baby that's made of soap that poops bubbles. Why? Yeah, we found our winner. So the show got a little dramatic, but now we're headed into Season 9. This is the new era of SpongeBob. The episodes are punchy, high energy, kind of fun again. You almost feel safe. But remember what I said before? The chaos never really left, it just learned how to smile. But we're still on our sacred quest. Find the one normal episode in a sea of sponge-induced chaos. And our winner is Tudor Sauce. This one is about SpongeBob that still can't drive, and Mrs. Puff basically giving up on him. So Mr. Krabs, genius that he is, decides he'll teach SpongeBob how to drive by himself, which goes about as well as you'd expect. Krabs is completely unqualified, SpongeBob is a moving disaster, and the entire town becomes a crash test zone. It's just a dude, a boat, and a boss trying to turn his employee into a delivery boy so he can save on gas money. If you've ever driven with your dad, you've lived through this episode. Let's look at the competition for a sec. We have Lost in Bikini Bottom, where SpongeBob gets lost in his own city and ends up living with a sewer-dwelling bottom feeder. Is this a metaphor for something? And I'm scared to know what. There's also Mall Girl Pearl, where Pearl tries to get a job at the mall. Feels normal until she goes through like 47 personality changes in 11 minutes. So a no-no. FoodCon Castaways is where everyone gets stranded on a desert island after a food convention trip goes south. Also, there's food-related hallucinations. Again, nope. So yeah, Tudor Sauce, our Season 9 champ. Not flashy, not creepy, we love to see it. But now we're talking about the shortest season in SpongeBob history. Like, weirdly short, with only 11 episodes. Clean, quick, and innocent looking. And for a second, you'd think, maybe we'll get a breather. Spoiler alert, we don't. So what's the most normal episode of Season 10? Drum roll, please. Whirly Brains. Just kidding. That's the one where they literally rip their brains out and fly them like drones. No sanity there. Let's talk about the actual contender. Feral Friends, a surprisingly calm episode about marine biology? Yeah, I'm serious. On paper, it sounds like another acid trip. A glowing moonfish zaps the town and turns everyone into realistic sea creatures, like actual National Geographic animals. It's weird, but it's also scientifically accurate. Even with the fish ray part, this one still feels normal in a way that characters behave in realistic ways once they de-evolve. SpongeBob becomes a literal sponge. Patrick is flopped on a rock. Sandy, who's immune to the fish beam because she's a mammal, has to rescue everyone while they de-evolve into their true forms. That's a solid plot. A coherent, logical, even science-based story arc. Steven Hillenburg actually used his major degree properly for once. Well, the visuals are still creepy, but in an artsy short film way. Not a Squidward's toenail explodes way. The stakes are about survival too. Not, we accidentally summoned a jellyfish god, just marine zoology with a weird twist. That's my best pick, I think. Compared to the other episode, this one feels mild. There's also Code Yellow, an episode where SpongeBob becomes a plastic surgeon and starts reconstructing Squidward's face mid-surgery. Yeah, no. It's the only episode in Season 10 that could low-key air on Animal Planet if you muted the scream parts. It gives a tiny bit of educational value, has actual tension, and a single character trying to solve a problem. So far we've survived Grease Wars, retail breakdowns, crash test lessons, brain fight, and even live-action SpongeBob. But this is where the show starts to go full throttle. Season 11 doesn't just break logic, it breaks the laws of physics, narrative, and sometimes common decency. If you thought we'd hit the peak of weird, you are so not ready for what comes next. We've officially entered Season 11, where SpongeBob's eyelids have frames of animation, and the background fish are more expressive than before. But guess what? We found our normal episode on the first try. It's called The Checkup. To sum it up, Mr. Krabs is overdue for a required physical exam. If he doesn't pass it, the Krusty Krab gets shut down. So what does Krabs do? Being the penny-pinching crustacean that he is, he goes full drama queen mode and tries to fake his way through the physical. Naturally, SpongeBob and Squidward have to trick him into going, which leads to more funny shenanigans. Classic. But hey, workplace healthcare in America is worse. The man really said, "I'd rather die than pay a medical bill." It's incredibly human behavior. Mr. Krabs is just a dude who really doesn't want to go to the doctor. The stakes? Entirely realistic. If you don't get your physical, your business gets shut down. That's some OSHA-level realism right there. On the other hand, the rest of the season doesn't really have realism. Take Krabby Patty Creature Feature, for example, with an experimental patty that turns everyone into creepy meat mutant fish monsters. It kinda sounds like the Last of Us plot, but with Patty. Or Man Ray Returns, where SpongeBob and Patrick try to turn Man Ray into a good guy via roommate bonding. It's like The Odd Couple, but one of them is a villain who will 100% kill again. It's a rare SpongeBob episode where everyone stays the same species the entire time. That alone puts it in the top 1% of normalcy. We got our normal quite easily for Season 11, but don't celebrate just yet because Season 12, that's where things start getting suspiciously stable. And you know what that means in this show? It's a trap. We have Boss for a Day in Season 12. A tale as old as time. Krabs loses his voice and temporarily steps away from the Krusty Krab. So SpongeBob is put in charge of the restaurant. So he fucks it all up, right? No, he runs it, like normally. He holds meetings, he assigns tasks, he manages workflows. He makes, I kid you not, a schedule. Yeah, he's actually killing it. It's disturbingly functional if you ask me. Until he becomes a little, too into the manager role. He starts bossing everyone around like he's running a Silicon Valley startup out of the freezer, even though they work in a place that sells burgers shaped like flowers. So the team pushes back. SpongeBob realizes he needs to chill. Balance is restored. Boom. Done. Everyone is safe. It's a normal day with normal power dynamics, normal character decisions, and a tidy 3-act structure. You could low-key air this in Season 1, and nobody would notice. Which is rare praise for Season 12, a season that had episodes like Plankton's Old Chum, where the town becomes plague-infested with buckets of literal radioactive meat. Or The Krusty Slammer, where Krabs turns the restaurant into a literal prison. He locks up customers, like actually incarcerates them. For fun! This isn't satire. This happened. That's 2 semi-normal episodes in a row? Wow. Are things stabilizing? Does SpongeBob finally become a kids show again? Nope. Because it's time for Season 13, where everything looks like a 3D scan of a lobster bisque, and the color grading makes you feel like you accidentally licked a highlighter. You've made it this far, so props to you for still having brain cells left. Most viewers checked out around the Patrick gets a new face era. This season alone brought up some of the most bizarre episodes of SpongeBob. Episodes like Something Narwhal This Way Comes, where SpongeBob and Patrick encounter Narlene and Nobby, 2 narwhal siblings who bring chaos to Bikini Bottom. Their antics lead to the whole town getting brainwashed. We also get A Skin Wrinkle in Time, telling the story of Grandpat accidentally causes a time-related mishap leading to various time-traveling adventures, like different eras of Bikini Bottom. But here we are deep in the HD Sponge Zone, still trying to find that one normal SpongeBob episode. And the winner of Season 13's Most Normal Award goes to Goofy Scoopers. It's about SpongeBob and Patrick just trying to do a new job at Goofy Scoopers. That's it. That's the plot. This episode is so normal, I had to watch it twice just to be sure it wasn't a prank. They're not saving the world, they're not destroying the town, they are scooping ice cream. The episode even tells about the time when they messed up. They get trained, they improve, they bond. It's like the Employee of the Month arc, but with sprinkles instead of Krabby Patties. There's even this moment where they're like, wait, this job is hard. And you can practically hear the collective sigh of every retail worker watching. Just 2 idiots scooping ice cream and trying not to get fired. You can watch it and actually remember what happened afterward, which is more than I can say for Squid Ferratu. Don't ask, don't Google it, just no. And now we reach the present. Season 14 and 15 is basically one, and Season 15 is still ongoing. But at the time of making this video, Student Driver Survivor is our final beacon of sanity. Mrs. Puff's got a competitor driving school, and it took every single one of her students. Well, except for SpongeBob. But she can't pay her bills without all the students, so instead she milks every single extra class from SpongeBob for an extra fee. Anytime, anywhere. In the middle of the ice, in the mountain, even in the late night. And you guessed it, it leads up to SpongeBob trashing down half of the city. Seeing this is going nowhere, Mrs. Puffs realized the only way to get her students back is to destroy the competitor, by sending SpongeBob there. Because the boy will make sure everything blows up when he's behind the wheel. Turns out the other instructor was a fraud, selling fake licenses. So SpongeBob accidentally takes down an entire scam. Good ending. Honestly, it could pass as a lost Season 2 episode if you blurred the HD textures. That's our Season 14 sanity so far, and possibly our last one. And that's a wrap, kids. You now hold the sacred knowledge of the most normal SpongeBob episodes in your brain. If anyone ever asks you, is SpongeBob really that weird? The answer is yes, but there were a few days where it wasn't. What do you think is the most abnormal episode of SpongeBob? It's really tricky to answer, right? Earlier this year, I made a video of what's the most normal episode of SpongeBob. While that video is already a weird journey in itself, it's nothing compared to finding its exact opposite, the most abnormal episode. Because what even counts as abnormal in this show? People get nuked, ripped in half, and travel through time every other week. And considering SpongeBob's already been running for more than 25 years, their crazy standard pretty much went on a roller coaster. So instead of going back and forth with the standards, I'm gonna try to find the one episode that feels so out of place compared to the rest in the same season, it feels like an abnormality. Alright boys, buckle up, and let's see how absurd this list can get. We're kicking things off with the first golden era of SpongeBob, Season 1, and right from the beginning, the show already gives us some pretty obscure stuff to pick from. This season is the best when it comes to world-building stuff. You've got starter episodes like Bubble Stand and Reef Blower playing around with the weird physics of this underwater town. They also love the exploring another realm theme here, like in Sandy's Rocket, Rock Bottom, and Neptune's Spatula. Meanwhile, if you want the actual time and space weirdness, look no further than SB-129. So, taking all that into consideration, the one episode that really stands out in Season 1 is I Was a Teenage Gary. Because for one, I Was a Teenage Gary is a rare first horror episode paired with Scaredy Pants. The fact that this was the first Halloween special also gives it a lot of credit for its unsettling tone. The whole panic of SpongeBob and Squidward starting to transform into these weird snail versions of themselves after that accidental snail plasma injection is just a different category compared to any of the time travel episodes. I mean, it's an episode you'd find hard to explain to your mom, which is kind of the theme for the whole list, basically. Now, as much as I love the grainy, washed out, and hand-drawn look of Season 1, Season 2 is the one that immortalizes the golden standard for what people call peak SpongeBob. It's stacked with OG memorable episodes like Dying for Pie, The Fry Cook Games, Something Smells, and Band Geeks. I also noticed that the writers really love to make plots about food in Season 2. Even outside the ones I just mentioned, you've still got stuff like Patty Hype and Jellyfish Hunter that play around with Krabby Patties. Even Band Geeks has some jokes about food in it.
Is mayonnaise an instrument?
Which is why Shanghai feels really abnormal in comparison. I mean, come on. The writing for Shanghai is genius and absurd at the same time.
The sky had a baby!
After the anchor drop, SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward visit the Flying Dutchman in his glowing green ship to complain about the anchor. From there, everything escalates in the best way. Squidward gets torched and tossed into the void, Patrick and SpongeBob roam around the city to help the Dutchman scare people, and then the whole negotiation for the 3 wishes is pure gold. And who could forget the whole perfume section bit? This episode is abnormal even by Season 2 standards. Then we move on to the last in the Golden Age, Season 3. This season is special for a good reason. Everything they did here is nothing less than perfection. I swear, half of all the SpongeBob memes and quotes come from this season alone. But beyond the writing and the jokes, Season 3 puts a lot of character exploration into each episode, especially for Mr. Krabs. Because there are at least 16 episodes that take place either around the Krusty Krab or use Mr. Krabs as the source of the problems. Episodes like Midlife Crustacean, Clams, and Born Again Krabs all feel like different, obscure ways of saying, how far can this crab go before the universe has to stop him? However, when we're talking about abnormal episodes, there are some pretty good contenders here. Nasty Patty is about covering up the accidental murder of the health inspector, even though it didn't really happen. We also have the season special Ugh, with all its Unga Bunga stuff. But I'm afraid none of them come close to what happens in I Had an Accident. The setup alone is already strange. SpongeBob shatters his butt in a sandboarding accident, gets paranoid about the outside world, and basically self-quarantines in his house with 3 inanimate objects as his new friends. And that's still nothing compared to arguably the weirdest 3 minutes of our lives watching SpongeBob. It's just not normal for a kid's cartoon, okay? And that's the Golden Seasons. I feel like we're finding some interesting choices so far, but we're still at the start of this journey. If anything, these abnormal episodes still feel tame compared to what we're about to run into once the show hits its later eras. Season 4 still carries a lot of momentum from the previous era, but you can feel the tone shifting. The pacing gets a little different, and the season really doesn't lean into those deeper character moments the way Season 2 and 3 love to. But it's still not a bad season overall. What it does start doing, however, is experimenting a lot with introducing new things to the canon to expand the lore of Bikini Bottom. We got stuff like Selling Out, Chimps Ahoy, and The Thing, which gave us some more big characters in the show. I love Kelpie G. Then there's some episodes about families like Enemies-in-Law and Rule of Dumb. But when it comes to weird plots that feel abnormal for Season 4 specifically, not many of them stick out more than That's No Lady. That's why I think this one's a no-brainer. I mean, come on. Patrick misunderstands the situation, panics, and the solution is, cool, so I guess we're cross-dressing now. Patricia immediately becomes the center of attention, and the episode escalates into her working at the Krusty Krab and managing to charm the pants off of everybody. I'm still feeling kind of weirded out by this episode. Now, Squid Bob Tentacle Pants is a strong contender because it's literally SpongeBob and Squidward getting fused together, which is equally disgusting and fascinating. But if I have to pick between the whole main cast gets morphed into one body, and Patrick successfully catfishes an entire town and has grown men acting silly over Patricia, I'm going with Patricia. It's less sci-fi weird and more socially cursed, which somehow feels worse. For Season 5, honestly, it doesn't feel like it's trying to reinvent the wheel. It continues the Season 4 style for the most part, and like they say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Except, they did start messing with canon more aggressively here, especially with 4 different special episodes. Friend or Foe, Atlantis SquarePantis, Whatever Happened to SpongeBob, Pest of the West. And Friend or Foe gives us the full Krabs and Plankton childhood backstory. So you'd think the abnormal pick would be one of those lore-heavy moves. But no, Spongehenge takes the spot for the most abnormal episode. Everything about this episode feels out of place, even by SpongeBob standards. SpongeBob basically gets pulled into this weird jellyfish myth arc, becomes famous for making sound from his body holes, gets pushed out by the same jellyfish that worshipped him, and then spends who knows how long building his own underwater Stonehenge, only to realize he's effectively outlived civilization.
How long was I gone? No!
And the ending doesn't even try to comfort you. It time skips thousands of years into the future, and Spongehenge now is just a tourist attraction for aliens taking pictures. If anything, that only makes our decision for Season 5 easier. As for Season 6, things get a little complicated here. I don't know what really happened in between Seasons 5 and 6, but for some reason, they are going all out with the gross visuals here. There are some episodes with infamous gross visuals. You know what I'm talking about. And there's some flat-out strange ones, like No Nose Nose and Squid's Visit. Squidward also starts getting tortured obnoxiously around this time. And Krabs goes all out with his Flanderization in Krabby Chronicle and Patty Caper. But weirdly enough, the one that feels the most out of place is Dear Vikings. Now, I'm not saying the episode is bad or anything. There are some very enjoyable moments in Dear Vikings. Unfortunately, the writing feels alienating compared to the rest of the season. SpongeBob becomes obsessed with Vikings, writes them a Dear Vikings letter asking about their lives, and then the Vikings respond by actually showing up and dragging SpongeBob and Squidward into their whole Viking lifestyle bit. It feels more like something Finn would do in Adventure Time rather than SpongeBob, if you know what I'm saying. And yeah, if this is where we are by Season 6, we're officially stepping into real obscure territory. As rough as Season 6 sounds, I still think it's easier than what comes next. Season 7 really does feel like an extreme jump. I mean, where do we even start? Some episodes are just mean-spirited, some feel like they exist purely to torture the cast, and then there's a big chunk of the season that just feels uninspired. I think they didn't really have any new ideas for Season 7, so they just decided to level up everything that happened in Season 6. Also, what's with all the folklore monsters in this season? Like Man Ray and Dirty Bubble didn't feel threatening enough, so now we're fighting random sea cryptids too? But luckily, there's still one good abnormal episode that serves as a beacon of hope for Season 7. You guessed it, it's Squidward in Clarinet Land. Well, technically, they didn't stop torturing Squidward here, but the plot, as trippy as it is somewhat interesting to follow. The setup is already ridiculous in the best way. Squidward demands extra space for his clarinet, Krabs solves the problem by handing him some ancient locker situation, and of course, he has to share it with SpongeBob because Bikini Bottom HR is a myth. Then SpongeBob turns that locker into a backroom clarinet dimension, and Squidward spends the rest of the episode chasing him through this endless, trippy backroom orchestra nightmare. And I can't lie, the Eaglehead is one of the few characters in Season 7 who shows up, says something weirdly profound, and leaves me with a pleasant feeling.
A clarinet is not owned. Why don't you tell me why you're really here?
It's trippy, it's entertaining, and comes with some enjoyable visuals. Truly different from the rest of the season. Now, Season 8 is honestly an improvement from Season 7. You've got some good ones, like Drive-Thru and Planet of the Jellyfish. Sadly, it's basically two extremes. It's either forgettable filler, or it's an episode that leans hard on discomfort. That's why the Season 8 abnormal picks are either body horror or emotional bleakness. I initially wanted to go with Ghoul's Fools for this one, since it's a proper Halloween special with a dark, spooky tone, featuring the ghosts of the Flying Dutchman's crew and Squidward's eventual acceptance of his own demise in the void. But I think It's a SpongeBob Christmas is a better choice, because it looks and moves like SpongeBob got kidnapped into an old-school holiday TV special. It's done in stop motion, inspired by those classic Rankin Bass-style Christmas visuals. The plot is clean, too. SpongeBob just wants Bikini Bottom to have a nice Christmas, Plankton slips zirconium into fruitcakes to turn everyone into jerks, the town goes sour instantly, SpongeBob has to scramble for a cure, and the fix ends up being a literal song antidote because, of course it is. Then Santa shows up, initially rewards Plankton, and immediately takes it back once the truth comes out, ending with the exact kind of petty comic justice that SpongeBob loves. It's a kid-friendly episode, and that's abnormal compared to most of the abominations in Season 8. Up next, Season 9 is another big transitional moment for SpongeBob. I guess they really wanted to step up from Season 8, that's why the team is willing to try lots of new, interesting stuff. You've got a widescreen ratio now, and a more crisp color. But it's not an instant better season yet, because you definitely still feel that something is lacking. The writing in Season 9 is still kinda meh. I mean, the jokes and the actions are somewhat good, but you still crave some of those golden standard jokes from the earlier seasons to make it perfect. I think if only they had those, this season would have been very memorable. And when it comes to abnormal picks, Season 9 really doesn't give you as many slam dunk choices as you'd think. There is some strange stuff like Patrick Mann and Married to Money, but to me, the clearest what am I watching pick is Kenny the Cat. The whole episode already feels surreal to look at. Bikini Bottom basically gets a celebrity cat, which is the underwater version of Tom from Tom and Jerry. SpongeBob is his fanboy, obviously, and the entire thing plays like a media parody fever dream. Then Sandy does the only sane thing anyone does in the episode. She calls him a fraud because a land mammal can't breathe underwater, and she's right. Kenny's literally using an oxygen tank behind the scenes. And knowing that Tom Kenny voices both SpongeBob and Kenny for this episode, it makes it even weirder. The man is basically talking with his alter ego for the entire episode. As for Season 10, it's a short list. The writers could have been testing ideas just for fun and said, right, why don't we make that a whole season? Actually, they made it short because most of the team was occupied working on the movie at the time, or that's what they said. But still, you could see the fresh ideas they had here. Mimic Madness is kinda good. They proved an exaggerated visual doesn't have to come with a disgusting feeling. But then you also had sports and whirly brains that are straight up brainless. Yeah, it's fresh, but that doesn't always mean it's good. Weirdly enough, I wanted to pick Feral Friends again for the most abnormal choice. But that would be contradicting since I also picked it for the most normal one. I don't know, Feral Friends was the most normal pick because their behavior becomes literally animal-like, but it's also the most abnormal pick because the show stops being SpongeBob and temporarily becomes National Geographic Bikini Bottom Edition. Does that make sense? Other than that, I think housewarming deserves the second spot. It's Parasite Nightmare Fuel, where SpongeBob becomes an apartment complex for an entire worm civilization, and he's way too committed to the bit. Yeah, it's one of those two abnormalities. And we're past the dark age of SpongeBob. That's the hardest stuff done, I guess. Whew. Or at least that's what I think. Because even though the rest of the modern seasons aren't as obnoxiously loud as the Dark Ages, the journey of finding the most abnormal episodes didn't get any easier from here. We've officially entered season 11, where the writers focused on making the humorous bits the whole premise of the episodes. Which is nice since they've proven to have better overall jokes than season 10, with episodes like Squid Noir, Scavenger Pants, and Mustard O' Mine. Unfortunately, that decision also brings us some lame, painfully obnoxious ones like Pat the Horse and Ink Lemonade. They're just tiresome to watch. But when it comes to abnormal episodes, season 11 had some pretty interesting choices. Squirrel Jelly is definitely abnormal and not in a good way. Doodle Dimension is also a strong contender for opening that strange portal to the Chalk Zone realm. But if I'm picking the one episode that feels like a different genre entirely, I have to give it to Krabby Patty Creature Feature. The plot is basically about what if the Krabby Patty became a zombie outbreak. A new secret Patty variation hits Bikini Bottom, people start turning into patty creatures, and suddenly the Krusty Krab is a containment breach facility with pickles. SpongeBob spends the episode trying to fix the disaster, and the cure ends up being hilariously on brand. He feeds chum to the infected until they revert back to normal, and then everyone collectively remembers the original Krabby Patty recipe was already perfect. As for season 12, I think saying it's the bottom line of SpongeBob history is not exaggerating. Personally, I don't really enjoy season 12, and I think most people would agree. But I also know some people that say season 12 is gold and better than season 10. So yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag with this one. There's still some good, memorable episodes here, like the obvious SpongeBob's Big Birthday Blowout, and a few underrated ones like Karen's Baby and The Ghost of Plankton. But when you compare it to the stinky parts of the spectrum, they get overshadowed pretty quickly, which at least means our choice for the abnormal spot is stacked. So what do we got? There's The Nitwitting, SpongeBob's Bad Habit, Gary's Got Legs is also not normal. So much to pick from here. I thought I had to pick some really bad episodes for the abnormal episode here, but that's when I remembered we've got a solid abnormal for season 12. Yes, it's SpongeBob in Randomland. The setup is simple and perfect. Squidward gets an order from Randomland, tries to refuse it like a sane employee, Mr. Krabs forces the delivery anyway, and then the episode becomes a guided tour through a place where logic is optional. The surreal journey itself is the joke for the episode. They have to walk randomly to even reach it. The environment keeps shifting rules on them, and the episode commits hard to surrealism as a setting rather than just a gag. Even though I didn't always understand what's happening there, at least the interesting visual style gives us something to look at. Oh, and they finally acknowledged the Red Mist reference, so that's another plus. It's random, and it's definitely abnormal. But just when I thought season 12 was hard to pick from, season 13 is rough and bland, to say the least. I don't know, man. It felt like they were running out of ideas and trying to scrape up all the little bits of jokes they had left. They overused some spin-off characters like Bubble Bass, Slappy, and Narlene. God, I hate Narlene. And half of the time, nothing really interesting happened in the stories. For the abnormal candidate, Pat the Dog is definitely up there. A Skin Wrinkle in Time is weird in a confusing way. I don't mind it though. And Squid Ferratu is conceptually bizarre, even by SpongeBob standard. But I'm gonna give the spot to Welcome to Binary Bottom. Watching robot versions of Bikini Bottom characters doing their daily routines is unexpectedly enjoyable. Even if the episode isn't fun in the classic sense, it's undeniably abnormal in a way that feels bigger than a single gag because the setting itself is the punchline. But I think that's expected based on season 13 standards. And yep, we're finally on the last part of our journey now. The most recent modern SpongeBob from the last 2 years. And wouldn't you know it, there are some interesting abnormal choices here. Starting with season 14, the show starts doing that thing where it tries to be more itself than itself, which is always a dangerous credo for any franchise to live by. It's deliberate that they're trying to bring back some classic energy and plot stylings from the first 3 golden seasons, which sadly translates into some nostalgia bait episodes. The ones like Squidiot Box and PL 1413 are definitely recycled from the earlier Idiot Box and SB 129 episodes. It's not deliberately bad or anything, it's actually quite enjoyable, it just feels a little lackluster, especially when compared to its predecessor. Then you get the ones that feel brain-dead weird like Sponge Chovy, where the town turns into anchovies, like the writers dared themselves to see how long they could keep a single bit alive. In the Mood for Feud is my least favorite because you know why, Narlene. But then we got some abnormal gems, like the 45-minute specials Creepaway Camp and my pick for this season's most abnormal, Snow Yellow and the Seven Jellies. It may be a little biased because I love the retelling of some classic old stories. And it's just fun to see SpongeBob and Bikini Bottom reenacting Snow White in their own underwater world. I hope they explore this kind of thing more in the future, but then again, it's personal taste. Season 15 isn't much different, and shares the same critiques I have with seasons 13 and 14 in general. Though I have to give them credit for bringing back the enjoyable storytelling pace. They also start to explore more and more about the characters again, instead of just forcing slapstick torture bits, which makes it feel more memorable and distinct than the previous season. A Fish Called Sandy is the most popular episode in this season, and for good reason. They brought back some of the old classic visual style with some classic references as well. It's one of the better nostalgic episodes, in my opinion. I also really love the fact that there are lots of Squidward-centric episodes in season 15. My favorites are Muse Bob Model Pants and Wiener Takes All. I just love seeing Squidward go on different kinds of adventures without getting tortured by someone else's stupidity. Coincidentally, that's why my pick for the most abnormal, as well as my favorite in season 15, is Unidentified Flailing Octopus. A story about Squidward and his house getting abducted by aliens that are shaped like tiki heads is really interesting and creative. I don't know why they don't make episodes like this more often. And with SpongeBob and Patrick almost non-existent in this episode, it allowed Squidward to carry the plot and be goated. Last but not least, there's season 16. At the time that I'm making this list, season 16 is still ongoing, and the newest episode is Pigskin Pearl. There were some funny, abnormal episodes in season 16, with ones like The Curse of Weredoodle, where SpongeBob transforms into a doodle every time his pencil hits full moonlight. Then he goes around rampaging everywhere with creative pencil drawings. And Squidward's Tough Break, because it's not every day you see Squidward and tough in the same sentence. It's fun to see him ditching the finesse jazz stuff and embracing the heavy metal motorcycle for once. But I think we've got the obvious answer for season 16. Just like the name suggests, Bizarro Bottom. I made a video about this one a while back. The story about SpongeBob getting stranded in a solitary part of Bikini Bottom and meeting the opposite version of everyone from Bikini Bottom definitely doesn't feel normal to me. Even if the episode isn't fun in the classic sense, it's undeniably abnormal in a way that feels bigger than squeezing a single gag, because the setting itself is the punchline. And that's the end of our abnormal journey. I can already hear some of you screaming in disagreement with the choices I made while making this video. So let me say it out loud. What episode do you think is the most abnormal? Honestly, if anything, this whole video kind of messed with my head a little, because it proves something I didn't fully appreciate before. This show keeps changing what weird and normal even mean. It's obvious the show has different kinds of crazy depending on the era. Seasons 1 through 3 are controlled chaos, so abnormal episodes feel like freak accidents. Seasons 4 to 6 is the experimental transition era, so abnormal feels less like a glitch and more like a warning sign. And nowadays, abnormal isn't just the story anymore, it's the shape of the show. Stop motion specials, big event episodes, and the like. They've experimented with so many things over the years because they refuse to die. Which is funny because I think they've considered stopping, at least creatively, more than once. Like they've tried out possible endings a few times, even if the series just keeps going.
He ain't budging.
Yeah, that's a kid's show, by the way. Now, if I asked you, is SpongeBob too much of a creepy show for kids? I know, it's a stupid question on paper. This is the brightest, goofiest, most memeable cartoon on television. And yet, if you grew up with it, you already know exactly why it's not a stupid question. Because, ironically, those creepy episodes are some of the most memorable, maybe even traumatic, moments in your life. Here's the problem though. There are 16 seasons of this this show, and every single one of them has something worth being considered as the creepiest of all. So I'm not picking just one. I'm picking the creepiest episode of every season. And no, before you say it, I'm not just listing SB-129 16 times, because the deeper I went, the more I realized creepy could mean so many things in this show, and figuring out what it does mean is where this gets so complicated. But before I can start, there are a few things I have to make clear, specifically what counts as creepy in a show where magic and ghosts exist, and where people get nuked and ripped in half on a daily basis, because creepy might mean something different to certain people. Sometimes it's dread, yes, we're talking about that something is wrong feeling for the whole episode. Sometimes it's a single image or even frame that just feels off. And sometimes it's not scary at all. It's just gross on so many levels. It makes you shiver every time you watch it. So I'm not technically picking the scariest episode of each season. I'm picking the one that creeps me out the most, whichever way it gets there. And yes, that means some seasons are gonna be a stretch, since some of these episodes aren't really trying to creep you out at all in the first place. And sometimes the creepiest thing I can find is one weird moment that just stuck with me. And even when we get there, I'll be honest about it. That's kind of the fun part, really. One more thing to add though, we're not bringing good or bad episodes into this context. That's another topic for another day, and you'll see me holding that line as best as I could. That being said, let's find our creepy. And we're starting somewhere you might not expect. Now, a lot of you are going to be expecting something like SB-129 or Scaredy Pants, or even I Was a Teenage Gary. And for a good reason, honestly. Aside from SB-129, the last two are the official Halloween episode special for season 1, so it's expected to give you an uneasy experience. And who could forget Squidward's journey into the void of nothingness alone, which he barely survives with a bit of luck. However, I'm not gonna pick all of those, partly because it's the obvious choice, and partly because there's an episode in season 1 that stuck in my head longer when I was a kid. It's the Rock Bottom episode, a story of SpongeBob and Patrick where they get on the wrong bus, then get stranded at rock bottom, and that's the whole horror of it. He's not in danger from monsters or supernatural causes. The boy's just stuck somewhere he doesn't understand, in the dark, where the rules are different and nobody's coming to get him. It's one of the most relatable nightmares in the show, both for adults and a child, especially a child. The thought of what if you were lost at unfamiliar places and things kept not working out, and then you have to wander everywhere while trying to get a sense of where you are. For a season 1 episode, it's shockingly good at making being lost feel like dread instead of an adventure. It's a high bar to open on, and season 2 is about to raise it, because it has so much creepy to choose from. Picking just one was almost unfair. There's Graveyard Shift, and there's Frankendoodle, and trust me, both of those come back later in ways you're not expecting. That's a promise. There's also the Procrastination episode. I mean, hell, the creepy feeling of running away from my responsibilities still haunts me to these days. That being said, the one I think is the most memorable is Wormy. One day, Sandy leaves SpongeBob and Patrick to pet sit her dome, and overnight, the caterpillar becomes a butterfly, which eventually escalated to terrorizing the whole of Bikini Bottom in a day. Now, despite the whole episode turns out to be very chaotic in a comedic sense, you understand very well the only reason I picked this episode is because of this. A real-life close-up shot of a bug. You see, the thing is, I didn't know that a butterfly could be looked at like this back then. All I know is that their wings are pretty. They fly with grace, unlike a mosquito or a dragonfly. And so, if that shot is enough to scare kids who know what a butterfly is, the fear has to be multiplied tenfolds when you're a fish under the sea that doesn't even know what a butterfly even is. So yeah, their panic seems way more reasonable now. It might not be scary to you now, but it found a real nerve back then, and I'm convinced they do it on purpose, unlike my pick for the next season. Just like season 2, season 3 has a few strong contenders. I guess this was around the time the team behind SpongeBob realized they found a real joy making kids cry and traumatized from watching cartoons on TV. Nasty Patty is a good one. Midlife Crustacean is also creepy in some way, especially if you're an old lady. One Krabs Trash? It could be seen as creepy. I mean, Krabs goes out of his way to dig the grave of Smitty Weber Jagenmajensen and ends up fighting the whole cemetery residents. Is Clams creepy? I don't think so. However, season 3 has a dark horse, which I deliberately picked today because I feel this is the one that's creepy in the head as an adult. Doing Time. Again, it started funny when Mrs. Puff had to go to jail for SpongeBob's lunatic driving. Then it quickly becomes not, because she soon realizes that she doesn't want out. Jail means no SpongeBob, and she's happy about it. And then SpongeBob and Patrick keep trying to break her out, and the episode slowly turns into her losing her freaking mind. We could see all her paranoia, the hallucination, the sense that she's coming apart in there, and the fact that the show isn't telling you whether she's okay by the end. You could say that this is the first time we came to a realization that all this time, Mrs. Puff was not okay when it comes to dealing with SpongeBob. We like to think that, oh yeah, it's just a mother having to deal with her problematic kid day in and day out. Like, maybe she loves to complain every time, but at the end of the day, she still treats him like her own kid. This episode proves that her feelings are nowhere close to that. And so that realization could be considered creepy, I think. Season 4, though, drops the psychology and goes straight for your stomach. Season 4 is where I started to have to deal with the gross episodes, because unfortunately, season 4 has no shortage when it comes to disturbing images. You've got Squid Bob Tentacle Pants, there's also The Thing. I heard some people didn't find Smelly to be quite as funny as others. Can you consider Once Bitten as creepy as well? Well, not really, unless you had a dying fear of a disease like rabies. The only good pick I could think of is Bummer Vacation. I mean, it gets kinda creepy halfway through the end when SpongeBob gets somewhat psychopathic when he's convinced Mr. Krabs wants to replace him with Patrick. But at the end of the day, my pick goes to The Gift of Gum. Yeah, the episode about Patrick giving SpongeBob a used wad of gum for Best Friends Day. I mean, chewed gum is one thing, but he gives this massive blob of chewed gum that Patrick's rolled around town like a katamari. So it's got stuff in it, like hair, garbage, and if you look closely, a person trapped in it. What kind of person thought this kind of gross thing would be fitting as a gift for your closest loved ones? Well, Patrick apparently. And the fact that the gum wins, basically the whole town ends up coated in it, which would prove to be more chores for anyone in Bikini Bottom. It's not creepy in the sense that used gum is so disgusting. It's more of, the thought of your friend actually wanting to give it to you with a smile on his face. Yeah, it could be that he doesn't know any better, sure, but what if he knows and intentionally gave it to you because he knows you will be too soft to reject it anyway? So yeah, I think this one is the most creepy episode for season 4. So that's my pick for season 4. But if you think gum is bad, season 5 found a way to make me miss it, because what's coming next is worse than a gross feeling. Season 5 is mostly lore expansion episodes and specials, and more gross episodes, unfortunately. The obvious gross choice would be To Love a Patty, or maybe even Goo Goo Gas. Why? I mean, because look at those babies. Tell me that doesn't haunt your sleep. But yeah, that's just disgusting rather than creepy. The same could be said about the Battle of Bikini Bottom. So, as much as I wanted to pick a new episode for season 5, the award goes to the same episode that I also picked as the most abnormal ones in my last video, Spongehenge. This one speaks for itself, I think. Lots of eerie sounds, The story of SpongeBob got cast away for who knows how long, and not to mention, it ended with the whole town basically in shambles and a field trip of an alien jellyfish that decided all this Spongehenge is some kind of old civilization art. Then again, even if you don't consider it creepy, I don't think we have a better choice. Or did I miss something? Let me know, because Season 6 leaves no room for doubt. This is where the show got good at making you sick. Season 6 is arguably the pinnacle of the gross-out era of SpongeBob, as if to perfect the 2 seasons before it. I don't have to mention them since it was so obvious, right? And so that only left us, or me, to one episode, Gone. The story about SpongeBob gets left alone in the city, because everyone got busy celebrating the No SpongeBob Day, or week, basically. And if it was not obvious enough why I picked this one, it's not only that it's a haunting journey for SpongeBob trying to live a new life alone in a city, not to mention he never really tried to find out why or where everyone is missing. It's the length that SpongeBob is willing to go to replace anyone in his mind to make some kind of conversation. At first, he's only role-playing as them. But as we go on, he made a doll Patrick from ground meat, and then moved it like a puppet, only to spiral more and more to the point he thinks a boat is being jealous of it? That's a genuinely creepy experience. A guy slowly losing his mind because he's alone, which weirdly is the perfect setup for Season 7, because Season 7 is the most depressing season of all. Right, Season 7, the cursed one, and you already know what you're bracing for. The mean episodes, the torture ones. You're expecting me to dig around in that pile, which surprisingly turns out to be good choices here when you think about it. A pal for Gary or one-course meal is creepy and makes you feel uneasy to some extent. The same could be said about Squidward in Clarinet Land, which is, I think, one of the highlights of Season 7. But since I've already picked that for my most abnormal video, I wanted to pick a different one, and that's why I picked Earworm. Yeah, this one proved to be a good psychological horror as well as a creepy one. Musical Doodle is about the lyrics that are basically about listening to something until you lose your mind, and that's exactly what happens to SpongeBob. He buys the records, he plays it on a loop into the night, he can't stop, and he starts coming apart. Then they pull the actual earworm out of his head at the end, a squishy, real worm, to get physical body horror to close it off. What makes this the pick is that this is creepy in Season 7 standards. The season everyone remembers for being cruel. Out of a whole season people remember for being cruel, this was the one episode that felt disturbing on purpose. And so after all that cruelty, you'd think Season 8 would finally let me breathe. Or so I thought, because this was not an easy pick at all. Speaking of which, I think Ghoul Fools is a good shout just because the Halloween specials are back after so many years gone. I really liked this episode. Lord Poltergeist seems to be a more competent ghost than the Dutchman when it comes to actually torturing and scaring people. He's still not as strong power-wise, but yeah. Then again, this episode is more of a fun one rather than being creepy. Face Freeze is filled with disturbing expressions for the whole 11 minutes, but there's nothing more to it than that. Are you happy now? Nah, that's just depressing. The same could be said about Demolition Doofus. And so the awards for the creepiest episode in Season 8 goes to the Krabby Patty that ate Bikini Bottom. One day, Mr. Krabs gets hold of Sandy's growth serum, puts it in a patty for profit, of course, and then the patty doesn't stop growing. The thing is, not only is the ground meat growing at a fast rate, it looks like it's alive because it keeps eating anything it touches. It's like a kaiju, a 300-foot Krabby Patty that rolls through Bikini Bottom, eating everything, whether it's buildings, the cash register, plankton, SpongeBob's shoe right off his foot. SpongeBob has to absorb it eventually, using all that meat little by little to make Krabby Patties at the end, which couldn't have been comfortable, I imagine. This is a different flavor than anything around it. For one, it's a creepy spectacle. And keep this in the back of your head, this is not the last time a Krabby Patty turns into a monster on this show. That comes back. And it comes back worse. But before we get there, we have to survive Season 9 first. Now, Season 9 isn't trying to scare you at all. If anything, they're trying to make you squirm. Nothing in Season 9 is creepy in any normal sense, I think. The only few options I could come up with from this season is either it came from Goo Lagoon, Seance Schmeance, or Squid Baby. Now, both the first two are very good episodes. The first one is about the gang discovering strange, ancient purple substances that are hidden beneath Goo Lagoon. It proves to be a problem once Plankton gets his hands on it, and then they have to save the day. As for Seance Schmeance, that one's about SpongeBob performing a ghost summoning ritual to get an old sandwich recipe. But I'm afraid when it comes to making you feel uneasy and creeped out, neither of them comes anywhere close to Squid Baby. Yeah, I mean, it's just not a pretty episode to watch. Because if you think Goo Goo Gas is already a bad meal, then this one is a full course of rotten food. Not to mention, it's a Squidward torture episode, built on the idea of putting a grown adult in a bloated head and a mind of a baby. Let's just say it's not a fun time to rewatch. So no, it's not scary, but it's the one that left me squirming. And by the rules, that's a win. And that squirm is exactly where Season 10 picks up, except this time, it crawls. Season 10 is the short one. Barely a season, really. So the pool's small to begin with, only 11 episodes, but if anything, it only helped me out because it hands us a clear winner without any meaningful competition. It's the housewarming episode. We've already seen a worm sitting inside SpongeBob's head once, but what if you multiplied it? What if they overtook his whole body to throw a rave inside him and practically turned him into a walking body horror exhibit? Ugh, I still get shivers every single time. The only one that comes close is Whirly Brains, but no, let's just not talk about that. And remember when I told you the Krabby Patty turns into a monster more than once? Season 11 is where I make good on that promise. Here it is, and it's the nastier version, one called Krabby Patty Creature Feature. Remember the giant sandwich from Season 8? This one, on the other hand, is the body horror version of the same idea, and it does not play around. Sandy and Krabs cook up a new secret patty. Everyone eats it, and then one by one they start to transform. Mr. Krabs first, swelling and stretching into this grotesque Krabby Patty creature, and then it spreads. It's technically a zombie outbreak episode, except the zombies are mutated burger monsters, and the way they infect you is by feeding you parts of themselves until you become one too? What were the writers even on? Is it creepy? Yes. But is it the creepiest? Debatable. There's a sponge in my soup kinda makes me feel uneasy as well. Or should I say, it disgusts me. The story is that Krabs is being cheap again. What else is new? This time by using leftover food from the trash can as a base for the Krusty Krab's new soup. Yeah, that's a new low. And if that's not disgusting enough, for whatever reason, some hippies behind the Krusty Krab decide to live inside the soup because, well, it's warm. So everyone eats it anyway without knowing. And the episode turns into this weird story about trying to get the hippies out of the soup, which ends with them losing and becoming hippies themselves? Yeah, I don't know. Monster Krabby Patty wins, I guess. Do you think Night Shift is creepy? Because I didn't really feel it. I genuinely couldn't think of any better episode from Season 11, but maybe you guys have a better choice. Let me know. Season 12 though? Season 12 actually gave me options. Season 12 is so much better than the previous one. We've got real options here, though granted that's a low bar to clear. We've got a cabin in a kelp, which is a great camping episode for the girls. The plot's good, but they never really commit to it as a scary episode, since it's packed with too many funny moments. The Hankering is also really creepy visually and story-wise. Like, they're just going to casually reveal that Mr. Krabs has had an acquired taste for chum this whole time. All these years, he's fiercely guarded his famous Krabby Patty recipe, and yet ironically, he also craves the very thing his rival is selling. And now that his usual chum spot is closed permanently, he has to get his daily fix somewhere, which of course means the chum bucket. He ends up chugging down a whole tank of chum by himself that night. Now that I think about it, Nasty Patty is tame by comparison to the hankering. So yeah, this one is a really strong contender. Other than that, Gary's Got Leg is also pretty weird and creepy, I think. It's a spiritual successor to I Was a Teenage Gary, but instead of making everyone a snail, SpongeBob gives his leg to Gary, and as a result slowly devolves into, whatever that is. So yeah, either one of those two, but I personally chose Gary's Got Leg. And with that, we move on to the last quarter of the show, where the definition of creepy starts to become fun again. And if there's anything fun that comes with it, it's that they're willing to explore some of their wildest ideas for the show. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing, but it's a commendable effort. And yet the first thing the modern era does with that freedom, it starts digging up its own graves. A callback to the good old hash-slinging slasher episode, Squidferatu. On a strange day, Squidward accidentally gets Nosferatu's mail. Yes, that Nosferatu, the vampire from the silent film, the one who showed up flicking the lights at the end of Graveyard Shift 20 years ago, he has to go return the mail to the castle, and SpongeBob tags along. And the whole thing turns into a genuine little gothic horror episode. That said, to my knowledge, the reception for this one isn't exactly glowing. Some people call it nothing but nostalgia bait, and as much as I agree with them, that's not really a relevant point for this video. Its sister episode, Slappy Days, is also treading a similar path, except this time the focus is on Nosferatu's butler, Slappy, doing his own weird and disgusting routine. But yeah, it's not as good as Squidferatu. However, the third option, and my choice for the creepiest episode in season 13, goes to Walhalla. Do you remember that one time they revealed that some crazy-ass old man has been living inside SpongeBob's wall all this time? Well, turns out he's actually the handyman who got trapped inside when the house was built years ago. But still, slowly finding out that some strange guy has been living with you without you ever knowing for all these years, tell me that isn't the opening scene of a horror movie. So Walhalla takes season 13. And season 14 keeps the momentum because the modern era is about to commit to horror harder than it ever has. Season 14 is pretty much just a continuation from season 13. Both of them aim to be as crazy as possible with the story, as well as some of its character development. You know that was a pretty way to describe the modern seasons, right? And similar to season 10, this one is quite short with only 13 episodes, which coincidentally also makes the creepy picks easy to spot. They've got an episode that is a straight-up horror homage with a dumb food pun stapled to the front, Necro Nom Nom Nomicon. The story is that SpongeBob's on a task to pick up a breakfast cookbook for the Krusty Krab, but because the shopkeeper is, baloney, SpongeBob ends up with the Necronomicon instead. You know, the cursed demon-summoning book from horror movies, except he thinks it's a cookbook, so he starts making breakfast out of it. Yeah, you could guess what happened for the rest of the episode, right?
Of course.
And if that wasn't creepy enough for you, then there's only one other name that could possibly deserve the title. The season's Halloween special, Creep Away Camp. It's a pretty good episode, and I really suggest you watch it if you haven't yourself. I actually want to make a whole separate video about it in the future, so I'll leave it at that for now. All I say is that even though it's built around the Camp Coral reunion, they pulled it off splendidly, giving us a proper, creepy Halloween episode. something we've all been waiting a long time for, which makes what happens in Season 15 even more frustrating. Oh, Season 15 is one that keeps on giving. I wish I could say that. Season 15 proved to be the most difficult out of all, simply because, for the first time, the show ran low on the kind of creepy I'd been chasing all video. The only episode I could think could get close is one I've already praised in my abnormal video too, Unidentified Flailing Octopus. And I don't love repeating myself, but unfortunately, and I might be wrong on this, I couldn't find a single other creepy episode in Season 15, outside of the Squidward UFO episode. The rest are just chaotic, or straight up weird. So if I didn't want to reuse the UFO one, I'm afraid I would have to cheat a little here by combining Season 15 with the still airing Season 16, which, for better or worse, also happens to have one uncontested answer. Consider it the finale this list earned. Remember way back in Season 2 that Frankendoodle promise? The one I doubled down on? This is the other half of it. 14 seasons later, we're back with Curse of the Were-Doodle. So one night, SpongeBob's studying late for his driving test again, but he falls asleep over his drawings. Doodle Bob comes to life, bites him, and the moment the full moon catches his pencil, a curse takes hold.
A were-doodle they shall become, alright?
And thus, SpongeBob transforms into the Were-Doodle. A werewolf in practice, but instead of fur and claws, it's a crude, scribbly doodle creature that brings drawings to life and rampages through Bikini Bottom. I do have one honorable mention though. It's the Go Fetch episode. This one's a proper Halloween episode. It's also a CGI special, which is why the episode only lasts for 6 minutes. And if anything, Go Fetch serves as a highlight for its crazy good high-action animation rather than a creepy horror story. Combine that with great music and you got a short movie that deserved to be called Halloween Specials.
Hey, that looks like Squidward!
Unlike its sister episodes, which is underwhelming, to say the least. And that 16 seasons, 16 creepy little episodes, is the whole journey. But finishing, it left me with a problem I didn't expect. So after a week of rewatching more than half of SpongeBob, I'm not gonna lie, this topic messed with my head a little. Now I'm really confused as to what creepy even means anymore. But anyway, when I started, I thought creepy was going to be one thing, and I'd just be ranking how much of it each season had. It wasn't like that at all. Creepy in this show was a feeling I kept arriving at down completely different roads. So I'll throw it to you the same way I always do.
Why does it take more than one squirrel to change a light bulb? Because they're so darn stupid!
It's easy to laugh when you're not the one being laughed at.
I think she should buy both.
You'll catch it stupid.
It's the stupid squirrel!
You remember squirrel jokes? It's the episode where SpongeBob becomes a comedy star by making fun of Sandy. Coincidentally, this is SpongeBob's most racist episode. Now, I'm not saying SpongeBob himself is racist, but this episode shows exactly how racism sneaks into our daily lives, through laughs, peer pressure, and silence. And it's not just a one-time thing. Bikini Bottom always treats anyone who doesn't fit the mold with a little racism. Because sometimes all it needs to hurt someone is one joke. It all starts with open mic night at the Krusty Krab, or as I like to call it, comedy night for bottom feeders. SpongeBob gets a shot at stand-up, and let's just say, it's rough.
What's the deal on those things?
So what does he do? He panics. He scans the room, he finds the one person he knows won't boo him, his best friend Sandy.
Did you ever notice how big squirrels' teeth are?
He goes for the easy target, not because it's clever, but because it just works. You've seen this before. A kid at school who always gets picked on because they're different or because they won't fight back. And tonight, for SpongeBob, it's Sandy. He cracks a line about Sandy's teeth, then her fur, her smell, her brains. And like magic, the crowd lights up.
They're so darn stupid!
Sandy laughs it off at first, because what else can she do? It's the show. But here's the thing about being the butt of the joke. It never stays on stage.
Hello, little critter. game.
Don't stand too close to a squirrel, Billy. You'll catch it stupid.
Now she's the dumb squirrel everywhere she goes. People mock her in the aisles. A child is told she might catch the stupid. And no, this isn't subtle. People actually think she is stupid squirrel. But that's the point. Once something becomes a joke, it becomes acceptable. The punchline has left the stage and circling her life. You say, relax, it's just comedy. But sadly, people who laugh don't always know where the line is. And the people who get laughed at, they start shrinking.
Since you've been telling them jokes, people have been treating me different.
But here's the thing. Sandy does what most people won't. She actually confronts SpongeBob, like a real friend would. Says it's hurting her, says, can you lay off the squirrel stuff? And SpongeBob, he agrees, sort of. Turns out, without punching down, he bombs. And just like that, the crowd turns on him. So he makes a choice. Yep, career over friendship, laughs over loyalty. He gets on stage, puts on a costume, and delivers the worst line of all.
We're laughing with you, not at you.
Honestly, that line should be in a museum. It's the rally cry of every bad comedian, school bully, and Twitter edgelord. We're not being mean, you're just being sensitive. It's how people justify racism in comedy. We're not being mean, you're just being sensitive. SpongeBob thinks he's won. The crowd loves him, Sandy forgave him, life's good. Until he walks into the tree dome. Sandy dressed up as the country southern squirrel. She plays it slow, friendly, syrupy, full southern charm. But don't get it twisted. This is revenge. She glues him to a log, takes his helmet, puts flowers into it like it's a vase. And when SpongeBob starts to dry out, she doesn't flinch. Sandy gives him a taste of what it's like to be dehumanized, to have your identity turned into a prop, your needs turned into a joke, and your life treated like a punchline. That's what SpongeBob did on stage, and now he's the one choking on it. This isn't crazy squirrel antics, it's a mirror. And when SpongeBob finally begs her to stop, she does. But the lesson sticks. SpongeBob opens another show with a squirrel joke, but this time it's different. He follows up with a punchline that hits everyone, including himself. He makes fun of crabs, the fish, even himself. He spreads the joke around evenly, and for once, the laughter actually feels good. It's a small redemption and a reminder that being funny doesn't have to be cruel. SpongeBob learns the real golden rule of comedy. If the joke only works by tearing someone down, maybe it wasn't that funny to begin with. But this episode isn't just about SpongeBob learning his lesson. It's about how easy it is to go too far, and how rare it is to be called out. And sometimes we just have to ask ourselves, how many of us have been in SpongeBob's shoes? Laughed a little too loud, a little too long, not out of cruelty, just not realizing who was taking the hit. And if Sandy never said anything, if she just smiled through it like everyone else, would the jokes have stopped? See, the thing about squirrel jokes is, it's not just a stand-up comedy episode. It's a case study in how easy it is to pick the other out of a group, and how hard it is to be the one who speaks up. Because let's be real, what Sandy did, that's rare. Most people in her shoes would have just swallowed it, shrunk down, avoided the next open mic night, laughed politely when feeling humiliated. Not because they're okay with it, but because standing up makes you a target twice. The first time SpongeBob pokes fun at her teeth, it's awkward but manageable. Even Sandy laughs it off at first. Because that's what people do when the joke's at their expense. They try to be good sports. But SpongeBob doesn't stop. He finds something that works and milks it dry, dragging Sandy's dignity down with every punchline. The more the crowd laughs, the more he doubles down, simply because being loved by the crowd feels too good to give up. That's where this episode gets sneaky. The villain isn't SpongeBob being cruel, it's SpongeBob being weak. He knows Sandy asked him to stop, he knows it's hurting her. But when the crowd demands a laugh, he gives them what they want. That's the cost of speaking up. Sandy had to risk her friendship just to ask for basic respect. She had to put herself in the awkward, vulnerable position of saying, "This hurts me." And even then, SpongeBob ignored her. So when she glues him to the chair, steals his helmet, and watches him dry out, that's clarity. She's forcing him to feel what it's like to have your discomfort turned into a joke, to be vulnerable, gasping, desperate, and still expected to smile. And when SpongeBob finally begs for mercy, she stops, because now he understands. The joke was never funny, not when he was the one being targeted. But if we're being honest, most of us are closer to SpongeBob than we want to admit. Not cruel, just careless. Just selfish enough to ignore it when the laughs are loud enough. But SpongeBob mocking Sandy on stage, that was just the start. There's one episode that takes it a step further, where the discrimination doesn't come from strangers, it comes from your own friend group. Let's talk about pressure. This one's kinda wild when you think about it, because the whole shenanigans start with simple conversation. Just Sandy and SpongeBob watching clouds, trading jokes, doing what friends do. And then one challenge, one competitive spark. Let's race. From there, it snowballs. First, it's a race up coral cliffs, then a foot race, then Sandy cheats, then SpongeBob cheats back. At first, it's funny, dumb, over-the-top banter. Chum chewer, air breather, golf streamer. It's all kind of dumb in a fun way until everyone else shows up. Now it's not just two friends competing, now it's sea creatures versus land creatures. It's about pride, about proving who's better. And Sandy, as the outsider, becomes the target. She's stuck there, completely outnumbered, while the people she hangs out with every day turn her into a punchline. It's not just that they're teasing her, it's that they start treating her like some weird species they're too good for. Look at her, she needs a helmet to survive down here. She can't even do what we do. She's not really one of us. And Sandy finally snaps, rips off her helmet in a room full of water just to prove a point. And what do? They laugh. They sit there while she's literally suffocating and they keep cracking jokes. Nobody helps, nobody even flinches. That's when it clicks. This whole thing was never just a silly competition. It became a test of identity, of dominance. Air breather versus water sucker. Each side painting the other as weird, less than, or just plain dumb. And the group? They're not just laughing at Sandy, they're performing their unity by ganging up on the outsider. She's the only land creature, the only female, the only one not laughing. And when she takes off the helmet, it's an act of desperation. Because when you're in a space that keeps invalidating you, you'll do anything to prove you belong, even if it hurts. And the boys? They don't just doubt her, they doubt her entire species. Land creatures can't do what we do. She can't even survive without her suit. So Sandy throws down the ultimate challenge. If I have to suffer in your world to be respected, let's see if you can even survive in mine. They flinch at first, hesitate, but they accept the challenge. Not to understand Sandy, but to beat her at her own game. They stumble through the surface like fish out of water, reduced to puppets and toys, props in a world that wasn't built for them. And the moment it turns hostile, when the local seagulls attack, Sandy jumps in. She defends them, she protects them, even when they wouldn't have done the same. That's the difference. She didn't have to prove anything, but she still shows up when it counts. Because she's not just trying to win, she wants them to understand. But here's the thing, not everyone handles it like Sandy. Not everyone throws down a challenge, makes a point, wins some moral victory. Some people, like Squidward, just get tired and leave. And when they do, what they're looking for isn't peace, it's relief. Which brings us to Squidville. Some of you might think, wait a minute, Squidville isn't about racism. Technically, yes, it's about Squidward getting fed up with SpongeBob and Patrick's nonsense and fleeing to a gated squid-only community. He's sick of jellyfish net fights, lawnmower chaos, and clarinet disrespect. So he finds a place where everything and everyone is just like him. Identical houses, identical routines, identical people. And at first, it's paradise. But then the mask slips. Everyone dresses the same, talks the same, hobbies are uniform, opinions are recycled, even their complaints are synchronized. The longer he stays, the more you realize what this place really is. It's not a home, it's a filter. It's a place that trims out the weirdos, the noise, and the difference. Tentacle Acres becomes less about peace and more about segregation, a place that promises comfort by filtering out the other. A place that seems utopian as long as you don't step out of line. This is what makes Squidville hit different when you see it in this context. It's quiet, sanitized, polite, but still exclusionary. A different kind of prejudice, one that hides behind order, taste, and fitting in. So yeah, Squidville doesn't have the jokes about land creatures or SpongeBob in a racially coded costume, but make no mistake, it still fits the pattern. Because here's what all three of these episodes have in common. They each show what happens when someone feels out of place, not because they're wrong or bad or causing harm, but just because they're different. And while Sandy fought back, Squidward, he just left. Because when the group won't hear you out, sometimes the only move you have left is to walk away. So, what are these episodes really about? 3 different stories, but they all point to one thing. Racism and discrimination in general don't always wear a villain's costume. Sometimes it shows up in a joke that goes too far, a group that gossips too easily, or a silence that's too convenient. But the damage is still real. Discrimination isn't always about hate. It's about habit, ignorance, and comfort. It's the stuff we laugh at without thinking, the friends we don't stand up for, the moments we choose not to notice. And that's the part where it hurts the most, not just being different, but being alone in it. After all, maybe being a good friend isn't about who's the funniest. Maybe it's about knowing when to stop laughing and start listening. Because if you don't, you might become the reason they shut up or give up for good. So yeah, maybe SpongeBob isn't intentionally racist, but these episodes, they show how easily the lines blur between fun and harm, and how even the friendliest place under the sea isn't always friendly to everyone. SpongeBob doesn't have a lot of sad episodes. It's a show built on brainless logic, fish puns, and chaos under the sea. But there are times when SpongeBob proves to be more than capable of playing with our emotions, especially this one episode. The one that breaks us, caught us off guard in the process. Because who would have thought that one of the saddest dramas in Bikini Bottom comes from something so simple, a snail food? The story starts with SpongeBob just walking home, dragging a massive sack of snail food. That thing is probably heavier than he is. But then he spots a note taped to his front door. It's a missed delivery slip. Pretty standard stuff. The delivery man doesn't have the finest reputation in Bikini Bottom. What's not standard, however, the package is a Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy paddleball challenge set. Of course it is. This show really loves inventing fake sports that just exist to ruin SpongeBob's life, huh? Jellyfishing, fry cook games, and now we've got paddleball. And not just any paddleball. This thing comes with a challenge that says,
hit the paddleball 29,998,559,671,349 times in a row.
Sounds ridiculous even for SpongeBob. But of course, our boy takes one look at that number and goes, yeah, I can do that. So SpongeBob is locked in, determined to beat the challenge right away, even though he clearly can't hit it twice in a row. That's just how men's brains work, I guess. We love to do stupid stuff for the sake of competition. Well, it's all fun and games until you realize what's slowly happening in the background. Because while SpongeBob's over there slapping himself in the face with a rubber ball, he clearly forgot about Gary's food ration. And Gary is just watching. He meows, once, twice, then louder. But SpongeBob just brushes him off. He said that Mermaid Man needs his help to defeat Dirty Bubbles by doing this challenge, and that he wouldn't let anything stop him, including Gary. So he just tells Gary to go somewhere else.
Pets, sometimes I wonder if they understand a word you're saying.
That line's gonna age real badly in about 3 minutes. SpongeBob is clearly being mean here, and being a bad owner by forgetting about Gary's rations. Also, this is not the first time he's done that, so it just makes sense for Gary to feel like he's had enough, decide to pack his stuff, and leave for good. I swear, man, that ukulele music hits way harder than it should. Then Patrick shows up again, said that he hasn't seen SpongeBob in a few days. He walks to SpongeBob's house, knocks on the door, and the bag of snail food is still there, sitting in the exact same place as before. SpongeBob has been doing this paddleball nonsense for days, without any break. He's just curled up in the corner now, paddle in hand, eyes bloodshot, muttering, "Darn it," like he's possessed. Patrick, being the emotionally stable friend he is, slaps him back to reality. He also tells SpongeBob that he took the same challenge once many years ago and won, but lost the trophy. That is completely unhelpful and also exactly what Patrick would do. But hey, at least SpongeBob snaps out of the challenge now. So they go into the kitchen for some refreshments, he trips over Gary's bowl, and finally realizes what he forgot. He looks at Patrick and says, "How long have I been doing the Dirty Bubble Challenge?"
Yeah, it's about a week, maybe 10 days.
10 days. He tears through the house, calling Gary's name, flipping cushions, shaking his treats. Even Squidward gets caught up in the chaos, and he's literally mid-bubble bath. That's how serious this is. But it's no use. Gary is long gone, SpongeBob. It's not until SpongeBob opens the mailbox that he finds it. A goodbye note from Gary. And that is where sorrow starts. Also, that goodbye letter is brutal, considering it was written by a snail. Gary literally writes, "These last few years have been some of the best of my life, but I must move on." What is this, a breakup letter? And then it gets worse. He adds, "Don't bother looking for me. By now I've probably found a new owner who actually remembers to fill my food bowl every now and again." Oof, that roast is painful. SpongeBob absolutely shattered reading that. You can see it in his face, the realization hitting all at once. The week he forgot, the empty bowl, the stupid paddle ball that literally cost him his pet. And for once, Patrick doesn't sugarcoat it either. He just points at the letter and goes,
"What do you mean you drove him away? It's right there in black and white. See? Right there. And there."
Patrick's gaslighting game is no joke, man. From here on out, the episode shifts into Gary's perspective. Gary's not having a great time either on his part. He roams around for days without food or any real destination. He tried to salvage some leftover nachos in the alleyway, but got scared by other snails. It's only by then Gary got found by a mysterious grandma who calls him Ms. Tuftsy, who later brings him home and takes care of him. She gave him cookies, blankets, pancakes with extra syrup, a whole jazz dance session. Gary's actually found a new home. Well, at least for now. Meanwhile, back in Bikini Bottom, SpongeBob starts looking for Gary. Posters, flyers, desperately shouting in alleyways, even got tricked by a snail po truck in the process. And what's wild is through all this sorrow and sadness, SpongeBob never once says how he feels. This is the rare moment where the show doesn't have to explain anything, because the silence says everything. Even when SpongeBob walks into the Krusty Krab the next day, he's broken. He dragged himself through the door, eyes sunken in, mumbling, "Sorry, I'm late."
Aha! You just forgot to put your hat on.
Cool. Thanks, boss. He puts on the hat, tries to flip a patty until a customer sends a patty back, because it's soaked in teardrops. It's actually kind of amazing, because the whole chunk of the episode is basically a mental breakdown played at kid-friendly volume. When I first watched this episode, I didn't think it would turn into this kind of sad, dramatic story. Not this heavy, at least. I just thought, the punchline is waiting around the corner, right? But no. Just when you think the sadness has peaked, that damn song hits you and takes the drama to another level. SpongeBob decides to fix everything and goes all out with the search. The flyers are up, the posters are out, SpongeBob's doing everything he can to make it right. And then...
Gary, now I know I was wrong. I messed up, and now you're gone.
Gary, come home.
You remember this, don't you? The Gary Come Home song? A whole sequence of SpongeBob trying everything he could think of to find Gary, only to miss him by a second, over and over and over again. Man, it's still a tearjerker even now. Doesn't matter if you're a kid, a teen, or 30 years old lying on your floor eating cereal at midnight, that song hurts. I don't know who at Nickelodeon gave this the green light, but they basically looked at the episode and said, yeah, we should emotionally devastate the viewers here. And it works. Oh, it worked too well. We could all feel how heartbroken SpongeBob was. At one point, he just stares at old photos and sobs. We've all been there, SpongeBob. And while all this is happening, Gary's still out there, on a couch in the warmth, being overfed into oblivion by a sweet old lady who thinks his name is Miss Tuftsy. From the outside, it looks fine. Yes, he's having a good time as Miss Tuftsy. But every time he sees a picture of SpongeBob, you can tell. Gary misses him. He just doesn't know if it's safe to go back. For everything he's been through with SpongeBob, Gary doesn't hate him. But because the last event feels so cold and mean to him, Gary feels that maybe he was too easy to forget. So it would be better to leave SpongeBob alone. And that's what hits me the most in this whole drama. This episode isn't sad because of the song or even the crying. It's the fact that neither of them really blames the other. They're just sad and wish things wouldn't go this way. But just when you think it's all tears and regret, the episode decides to throw one more curveball. because Gary's about to discover something that completely changes the tone of the story. The last place you'd ever expect to find actual horror. Remember all those flyers SpongeBob threw around earlier? Well, it somehow made its way to Grandma's house, because Grandma's been collecting paper for Gary's litter box. This is the first time Gary actually sees one and realizes SpongeBob's been looking for him this whole time. Seeing the news, Gary doesn't even think twice about going back with SpongeBob. He's ready to go back to Conch Street. Except, it's not that simple. In an effort to grab his stuff back, which is a framed picture of SpongeBob, Gary unexpectedly opens up a forbidden closet and finds a whole stack of empty shells. Snail shells, to be precise. Exactly like this. Yeah, no, something is definitely wrong. Soon, Gary started to notice, too. Everything makes sense now. The weird absence of other pets, the endless buffet of cookies and pancakes, the way Gary's belt literally explodes off his body from how overfed he is. Grandma doesn't love pet snails. Grandma loves to eat snails. This turn in the plot is the last thing I would expect from SpongeBob. Why are we suddenly going horror now? Gary sees the shells, the music cuts, the lighting changes.
Run!
And run he does, while Grandma chases him, throwing cookies and deviled eggs like ninja stars. What is happening anymore? My tears aren't even dry yet, and now I'm watching Gary dodge pastries like it's a boss fight. But Gary made it. He's a smart snail. Living with someone like SpongeBob teaches you something after all. He manages to trick her and hides, swaps places with that poor background snail from earlier, RIP to that guy. I hope he made it out, but I'm not putting money on it. That was a weird part, not gonna lie. Though, after the twist, cookie chase, and terrifying Grandma, somehow, this episode still manages to pull itself back into something hopeful. A scene that finally gives us we've been waiting for, the reunion. And then we cut back to SpongeBob. He's still not in good shape. He's sitting on the couch, staring into space, and says,
I can't cry anymore, Patrick. When Gary left, he took all my tears with him.
And Patrick, being Patrick, tries to help by talking about balsa wood. Yeah, it clearly doesn't help. SpongeBob just snaps, starts bawling again, and runs off into the street screaming Gary's name like a man who just lost his house, his job, and his will to paddleball. He goes to see a billboard with Gary's face in it to get the finale.
I took you for granted, Gary. I'm sorry. Don't just stare at me. Say something. I'm talking to a billboard. Now I'm hearing things. If only I could see you one more time, so I could tell you how much I love you. If only I could hear you meow one last time. Meow. Yeah, like that.
And there he is. Gary sitting right on top of SpongeBob's head like he never left. He's home. It's the perfect ending, in my opinion. We don't need a whole paragraph of apology and crying sessions. Just two characters who missed each other and finally got back in the same room. And SpongeBob goes, "Let's get you something to eat. You must be starving." Which, yeah, the man literally forgot him for 10 days. The minimum you can do is throw some snail kibble in a bowl, maybe with a side of emotional support. Looking back, this episode is kind of wild coming from SpongeBob, where they usually treat logic like an optional setting. And yet, here we are. An episode about loneliness, guilt, and how easy it is to hurt someone you love just by not noticing them. How often do we get caught up in our own little missions, hobbies, routines, obsessions, and completely miss the people quietly needing us? And for a kid's cartoon, that's some heavy stuff. I'm glad they made this season 4 special. Nickelodeon managed to show us that they are capable of doing something great without Hillenburg at the head. SpongeBob wasn't supposed to have expanding lore. It wasn't that kind of show initially. When it first aired, every episode felt like a weird little story. SpongeBob forgets how to tie his shoes. Patrick's just doing Patrick's thing. Squidward is just dying to have some peace and quiet. In fact, that was the charm of the Golden 3 seasons. Just pure cartoon chaos of life underwater. All it needed was SpongeBob being happy, Squidward being miserable, and a town full of fish pretending that any of this made sense. And then the first movie happened, and the show, it came back different. The colors were brighter, the pacing was faster, even the world suddenly felt bigger. But what's interesting is that somewhere in that transition, one episode quietly rewrote the entire playbook. One episode that most people barely talk about, but one that marks the moment that SpongeBob moved beyond being just a sitcom and grew into its own lore. And that episode might just be the most important one that SpongeBob ever had. But to understand it better, I have to take you guys back to 12th century Bikini Bottom. Back to a crowded arena, a bad idea, and a jousting collision that knocks SpongeBob and Patrick into an adventure. The adventure kicks off with SpongeBob and Patrick sprinting into a Renaissance fair called Medieval Moments.
Welcome to Medieval Moments. You're just 20 wizard's paces away from swords, sorcery, and bad hygiene.
They've got everything set up to resemble the medieval era, from historically accurate decorations, fake royalty, even an accurate castle guard.
Someday, but not today.
Unfortunately, by one spectacular misunderstanding, our boys volunteer for the royal joust.
Be watching the joust, you're in the joust.
Without any way to escape, they end up jousting each other and get launched into the sky. This is when things get weird, because somehow, some way, when they land, they magically wind up in medieval Bikini Bottom. And things here don't go well at all. They're immediately surrounded by the knights and get captured by force, because falling from the sky apparently counts as a felony here. So they both get tossed in the dungeon, and here's where they first meet Squidly. As the name suggests, he's Squidward's ancestor, a doomed court fool who sings about getting the king so mad he had a stroke. This is also the moment Squidly curses his 7th great-grandson to suck at playing the clarinet.
If I never learn to play with ease, may mine own great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson be cursed tenfold.
This ironically explains why Squidward is still an underappreciated artist. It was a curse from Squidly. But at least Squidly is somewhat good at singing. Through his ballad, Squidly sings about the hospital and ye old bowling alley getting blasted by the dragon or giant jellyfish. Take your pick. It sounds silly until you realize we're hearing a 12th century version of Alaskan bullworm. All three of them then get called upstairs by King Krabs, where they are interrogated about where they came from. SpongeBob insists on their time traveler explanation, which the king obviously doesn't believe. And one bad ballad mocking the king, and you got this mess.
Send these slanderers to the guillotine.
SpongeBob and Patrick almost lose their heads if not for Princess Pearl pointing to a prophecy literally hanging above them.
How long has that been there?
The prophecy basically says that one day there will be a warrior that falls from the sky, who will swear their allegiance to the king and help to fight the Planktonomore. Unfortunately, the king's confusion is cleverly exploited by Planktonomore, who manages to break into the castle using the Jelly Dragon and captures Princess Pearl. With not many options left, the king finally chooses the two to rescue Pearl from Planktonomore, and then finds a footnote saying he should have kicked them out. He does both.
We kick ourselves out of places.
Jokes aside, this is the show using The Chosen One as their main plot again, since they released a SpongeBob original movie not long before this episode, which is also about SpongeBob and Patrick trying to save Krabs from misery. On the road, they stop at a blacksmith. SpongeBob gets knight's armor, and more importantly, a jellyfish net. Seems obvious, right? You don't send a knight to fight an ancient jellyfish, you send a jellyfishing expert. Cut to the evil tower, Planktonomore is discussing his next step with his crystal ball wife, Karen.
Planktonomore, thou art cocky and overly confident with thyself.
Karen has been downgraded to orb form, but is still roasting him in this century. This marriage has survived time travel, which is impressive. Meanwhile, at the bridge, a towering dark night blocks the paths of our heroes, but it turns out it's medieval Sandy. SpongeBob goes straight to karate, absolutely clowns her in a second, and she goes,
By the hammer of Odin, this be a new fighting style mine eyes have not yet seen.
After a quick and fierce duel, SpongeBob delivers the final blow that ends the fight. By the way, did you guys catch that? Medieval Sandy calls SpongeBob's move a new style and asks to learn it.
And learn a trifle of that karate.
That's actually a paradox. The show flirted with the idea that SpongeBob might have founded karate in Bikini Bottom by teaching it backwards in time. Just like how Squidward paradoxically teaches prehistoric SpongeBob and Patrick to jellyfish in SB-129. They've started treating it like a recurring joke. And speaking of something familiar, this message is sponsored by Raycon. It's Raycon's anniversary and the essential open earbuds are stealing the spotlight because they're 30% off. I use these things daily. They've become my edit day cheat code. They sit perfectly outside your ear canal so I can hear my audio and the world at the same time. Perfect for catching timeline notes and, yes, SpongeBob laughing in the background. They stay put too, since they're lightweight and secured by a multi-angular hook that rotates and locks in, so no need to wiggle them back in place when I'm walking, cleaning, or pretending to joust my laundry. They're also capable of multi-point connection, meaning I could bounce from laptop to phone without menu diving, and the battery holds up to 8 hours on a charge, plus 36 more from the case. And look, it's a premium sound without premium brand pricing, backed by millions of happy customers and a 30-day happiness guarantee. I use these, and unless you're living in Bikini Bottom, you should too. Hit the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/SpongeTruthsOpen to get 30% off the essential open earbuds. Again, that's buyraycon.com/SpongeTruthsOpen. Ordering through my link will help me solve many more theories in the future, so thank you. Alright, ears open, karate's over, and we're back on the journey. The crew got the bright idea to infiltrate Planktonomor's fortress by weaponizing cowardice, crying for mercy while a guard plucks SpongeBob's eyelash. It's just stupid, but hey, it works. So, up the tower they go, climbing the countless steps. And when they finally get to the top, this is the very moment where Planktonomor truly shows his wicked, twisted, and evil character.
You truly are the nastiest wizard in all of Bikini Bottomshire. Prepare to be vanquished!
So the two start the final battle, and SpongeBob immediately steps on him by accident. Classic. But Planktonomor's trump card is the Jelly Dragon, who zaps everyone and corners our heroes. So SpongeBob reveals his own trump card, the jellyfish net. He quickly attacks the dragon, it almost holds, then it shreds. With nowhere to run, SpongeBob finally pulls out the lunch he'd packed earlier, Krabby Patties. The dragon sniffs, purrs, eats, and suddenly the dragon is his pet now.
Destroy them! Curses!
We cut to the celebration. Squidly sings about their achievement while everyone begs him to stop. Everyone's cheering about their success while King Krabs is feeding the jelly dragon patties.
I doth wonder if I couldst sell these.
This also marks the second paradox in the story, or almost a paradox. King Krabs is contemplating the possibility of making profit off of Krabby Patties, which he learns from SpongeBob. But sadly, it's not the real origin of the Krabby Patty. Friend or foe in Season 5, we'll lock that in later, but at least it reframes the patty as an idea that reincarnates until someone monetizes it. Then the story ends with a rock smash, a slapstick launch, and snap, SpongeBob wakes up at the fair like it was all just a dream. Except Patrick is still holding Squidly, squished like an accordion with a broken clarinet. So it's a dream? Time travel? Or SpongeBob Schrodinger? Anyway, I can already hear you guys saying, why is this episode so important anyways? They just recall some old gags, nothing serious. Well, because Dunces and Dragons is the first time SpongeBob trades the old sitcom reset for a refrain, where they kept the same melody but kept changing the verse. Or simply put, from this point on, Bikini Bottom actually remembers something, through roles, running gags, and ideas that come back wearing different hats. But how did one medieval detour give the show permission to get bigger? Canon, scale, and all. And what did it mean for the seasons that followed? You know what's funny? The more I rewatch this episode, the less I care whether it was a dream or actual time travel. What's more important is this episode subtly winking at us and saying, don't sweat the mechanism, pay attention to the pattern. And once you actually see it that way, everything just clicks. What this episode teaches SpongeBob to do is take the movie's big plot devices, prophecies, quests, rescuing the princess, and run them through the familiar sitcom engine without losing the dumb, lovable rhythm underneath. As I said earlier, the first 3 seasons of SpongeBob only gave us mundane plot topics, like Krabs trying to force his employees to buy his cheap boots and squeaky boots. Sandy trying too hard to practice karate with SpongeBob in karate choppers, and Pearl needing a boy to accompany her on prom night in The Chaperone. Even when the show actually flirts with horror or mystery or even science fiction plots, they're usually revealed to be stupid gags or misunderstandings in the end. All the built-up horror in Graveyard Shift turns out to be a young kid trying to get a part-time job. And Nosferatu, no one actually gets killed in Nasty Patty. Everyone just laughs while drinking soda. Even in a bigger plot like SB-129, Squidward's time travel changes almost nothing other than that it paradoxically teaches some prehistoric sponge how to catch jellyfish, and then it never gets brought up again. They never make an episode plot that actually connects to the previous. Everyone just forgets and the world is reset by the next episode. That's the sitcom rules they've held tight since the very beginning. But as we all know, Hillenburg and the original team wanted to end SpongeBob with the 2004 movie. They thought it was the perfect plot to explain the final episode of SpongeBob. They made one big heroic tale for SpongeBob and Patrick, they saved Bikini Bottom from Plankton's control, everyone lives happily ever after, and credits roll. It was a perfect bow to the fans. That's the end they wanted. But Nickelodeon watched the numbers and said, well, people love to watch SpongeBob on a bigger scale, right? So now the question is, how do you come back from a finale, keep the sitcom soul, and still chase the bigger, connected plots that audiences clearly want? So with Hillenburg and most of the original team gone, they were willing to experiment. Season 4's Dunces and Dragons is their test kitchen, where they're trying to implement everything I said previously. Lots of their gags here subtly overshadow their life in regular Bikini Bottom by having the bigger stakes of saving the kingdom. A good example is that the prophecy literally hangs over the throne like a Krusty menu, and Krabs is still forgetting about it.
How long has that been there?
Does that ring a bell?
Your guarantee.
Oh, that.
The dragon in the story is just a giant jellyfish in cosplay. Maybe this jelly dragon is the ancestor of the king jellyfish that chases the jelly spotter. And both of them are tamed just by some lunch that SpongeBob made. And the jellyfish net? Can we talk about that? When SpongeBob pulls it out in a boss fight, for a second you think, of course that'll work. The only way to fight a jellyfish is to capture it with a net. And then it almost does, until it doesn't. This is kind of poetic, representing the old recipe of the pure sitcom energy of the pre-movie episodes might seem to work, but there's also the new scale of fans' expectations. So the show improvised. If a net can't catch the dragon, surely a Krabby Patty can tame it. Because if there's anything that can't be watered down by time, it's the personality of their main cast. No matter what kind of plot or troubles they get into, as long as their dynamics stay intact, the show will always be interesting because, surprise, that's why we loved SpongeBob in the first place. SpongeBob in armor is still reckless optimism that refuses to see a monster. Patrick in a helmet is loyal chaos that will follow you into a disaster and call it friendship. Squidly is the cursed clarinet guy who's ready to diss you with any form of art. And yeah, he literally curses the bloodline, which is such a dark little joke you barely notice it. Krabs instantly thinks about sales the second a patty hits his tongue, because profit is his sixth sense. Planktonamore is a tiny ego in a tower, and Karen is still rolling her eyes through the orb. And Sandy? The moment she sees a move she's never seen, she wants to learn it. That one exchange, "This be a new fighting style," is the show planting a time loop grenade under karate. That whole subtle gag is the bigger shift they were trying to make. They wanted the post-movie SpongeBob to have the same scale as the movie while still keeping the regular show characters and dynamics. And once you give the show that kind of permission, of course the world gets bigger. You start seeing the effects immediately. We get lots of new plot lines with new characters just in season 4 alone. Krabs meeting with his old pals from his Navy days in Shell of a Man. Turns out Sandy does have a boss that keeps an eye on her invention's progress. And we get to see other octopuses like Squidward that actually succeed in their careers, like Kelpie G. But the clearest sign of these changes is that the writers stop pretending the past is gone and actually start using it as a prop for their next plot. Friend or Foe explains the true story behind Krabs and Plankton's friendship as kids, how the Krabby Patty was made in the first place, and would go on to fuel their rivalry in the future. I mean, if a patty can echo through the centuries, then yeah, Krabs and Plankton deserve an origin that actually sticks. The original Fry Cook treats the early Krusty Krab like actual history. Previous staff, rising sales, a younger Krabs, and a different Squidward rhythm. And you feel the change in how new episodes talk about the place. Even later, the show would go as big as Atlantis SquarePantis to prove this point. They can leave town and still feel like SpongeBob because the dynamics between roles also travel with them. So when people say post-movie SpongeBob is louder, sure. But I'd argue it's also braver and bolder exactly where it needs to be. If you felt that click during Dunces and Dragons, or even that, wait, this show is connecting things feeling, that's why this is the most important episode. It's their first sign of acceptance saying, yes, there's a lore for SpongeBob, and it's canon. Yes, we can build on what we've done, and still be funny tomorrow. So here's my line in the sand. If someone asks, when did SpongeBob change? I point to Dunces and Dragons. It's the single most important episode in that transition. I don't know if you ever heard about it, but people used to call SpongeBob woke propaganda from time to time. And my first reaction was, that's stupid. It's a cartoon about a sponge who flips burgers. But then I actually sat down and looked at what they meant. I also rewatched a bunch of episodes that kept getting brought up. See, I went into it ready to laugh the whole thing off, but apparently, maybe that's not the case. Because at the end of the day, SpongeBob is woke propaganda. By any honest definition of the word, the people calling it that are right. They're just wrong about what it means. So when people talk about SpongeBob being woke, it's kind of tricky because it's definitely not just one simple thing. It's a few issues, or allegations even, stacked on top of each other. However, the whole accusation always looks, well, it somewhat makes sense. Let's start with the obvious one. SpongeBob is gay, which is a lot. And before anybody gets defensive, I don't think that's an insult. Besides, the show loves to make jokes about it anyway.
In a lagoon and kissed with coral blue #2 semi-gloss lipstick.
Actually, it's coral blue number.
He gets played as feminine all the time, sometimes for a 1-second gag, sometimes for an entire episode. He also shows zero romantic interest in women across hundreds of episodes. His closest relationship is with a pink starfish guy, which they do love to wear briefs with each other's colors. And then there's also an episode where Patrick cross-dresses as Patricia and successfully catfishes the whole city. In fact, Squidward and Mr. Krabs seem really keen to him. Not to mention, there's also a bit where Squidward insists that SpongeBob specifically used the maid uniform when serving him in Can You Spare a Dime? Actually, that might not be directly tied to the whole gay thing, but you know. Anyway, the people picked up on this fast, because by 2002, SpongeBob somehow had become a bit of a gay icon. There's a few strange stories about this, and as I recall, one of them was how gay stores across the US were selling so much SpongeBob merchandise because it was popular among gay men, because they liked SpongeBob's flamboyant nature and themes of tolerance. Even the Wall Street Journal ran a piece about it around that time. They wrote a big title of, "Will SpongeBob Make You Gay?" However, it's little to no surprise, when they asked Hillenburg directly, is SpongeBob gay? He had no trouble answering that outright. He answered that SpongeBob is asexual, which is just the scientific answer for it, because sea sponges reproduce by budding, after all. He also added that the show is about tolerance, that everyone is different, and that nobody gets shut out. He wanted to make it very clear that SpongeBob had no agenda whatsoever. Like, come on, it's just a show about underwater life goofing around. And even then, the answer didn't really matter, since it still blew up even bigger in 2005. James Dobson of Focus on the Family stood up at a congressional dinner and called SpongeBob part of the pro-homosexual agenda. The actual issue was a tolerance video that was about to be distributed to school, which used SpongeBob in it. It contained generic advice about what teachers should do if kids ask them about atypical homes, like ones with adoptive parents or step-siblings. I mean, it does promote tolerance of diversity, but according to the news, the video contained no reference to sex or sexual lifestyle. However, Dobson eventually walked it back slightly. He said he never called SpongeBob gay specifically, but the damage was done nonetheless. SpongeBob had officially been called propaganda by a major conservative organization in front of Congress. And true to their style, anyone from the show responded the same way. Asexual, about tolerance, the whole not what we're going for again. But here's where it gets interesting. Fast forward to 2013. an episode called SpongeBob, You're Fired airs for the first time. The story is that Mr. Krabs fires SpongeBob to save a single nickel. Of course, SpongeBob spiraled because he had lost his identity as a fry cook, right? He struggles to do anything, desperately trying a few other jobs, but he eventually comes back after Squidward rescues him. Wouldn't you know it, Fox News and the New York Post immediately used the episode to argue against unemployment benefits. Their take was, look, even SpongeBob doesn't end up on food stamps because his patty-making skills are in high demand. Role model behavior, he doesn't mooch off social services. By the way, this was just days before the federal government reduced the benefits provided to 47 million food stamp recipients by 13%. So, yeah, some people didn't take it too well. So, Al Sharpton goes on the air with, "Just because a sponge who lives in a pineapple under the sea doesn't need government help, that means no one does." A cartoon about a fry cook getting fired turned into a national debate about welfare. That's where we are. And then, not too long ago, in 2020, Nickelodeon tweets a rainbow SpongeBob for Pride Month. This officially places him in the LGBTQ+ community. You guys might still remember vividly about these ones. Make of that what you will. Now, if you stopped right there, you'd already have a pretty solid case. A 25-year-old kids show called Gay Propaganda by a major conservative organization, accused of pushing anti-work messaging by a major news network, and then formally placed into the LGBTQ+ community by its own studio. That's enough for most people to make up their minds. But if we stop there, we miss the actual interesting part, because queer coding is only one piece of the stack. The rest of the case is bigger and weirder. Take squirrel jokes. One night SpongeBob bombs at a comedy show. He panics and starts cracking jokes about Sandy being a dumb squirrel. And for better or worse, the crowd loves it. He keeps going. Then the whole town starts actually believing it and treating Sandy like she's stupid. Sandy comes to SpongeBob privately and tells him the jokes are hurtful, and he knows it. And SpongeBob just goes, "Come on, it's just a joke. I'm joking with you, not at you." Which, if you've ever been on the receiving end of that, you know exactly how that conversation feels. The episode resolves when SpongeBob flips the format and starts making the same kinds of jokes about everybody, and it works. But the thing that stuck with me rewatching it is how specifically the show depicts the mechanism. How comedy that targets a group, even when it starts harmless, becomes the thing that actually shapes how people see that group. In short, it's how stereotypes start, right? And as if that's not enough, there's still the Krusty Krab issues. Because when you look at how the Krusty Krab works, there's apparently another agenda hiding there. See, Mr. Krabs fires SpongeBob to save a nickel, charges customers to take a step in another episode, almost sells SpongeBob's soul for 62 cents, and then drives an entire jellyfish population to near extinction because he figured out he could monetize their jelly. And let's not forget, SpongeBob, who works constantly, gets paid almost nothing, and genuinely loves every second of it. It's the portrait of a worker who's been exploited so completely, he doesn't even realize it as exploitation anymore. But Squidward sees all of it. He knows exactly what's happening. Episodes like Squid on Strike shows where Squidward stands on this matter. Well, sometimes. He gives a speech about dismantling oppression and sending the hammer of the people's will through the windows of Mr. Krabs' house of servitude. The good thing is, Mr. Krabs eventually comes crawling back because the restaurant can't function without his trusted employee. People call this anti-corporate propaganda, because practically, it teaches kids how to organize a strike against a cheap boss. And then there's the global warming stuff. In Season 5, after stepping back from the show, Hillenburg came back to write and direct exactly one short called The Endless Summer. The story is that Mr. Krabs intentionally pumped carbon dioxide into the water to cause global warming so he could charge customers to use his new pool. But as always, SpongeBob takes it a few steps too far and ruins the whole thing. He came back for a 2-minute episode to make fun of corporate greed and spread awareness of global warming. That's it. There's also a strange conversation about some minorities in Bikini Bottom, about Sandy Cheeks. You know, since she's a land creature living in an underwater world. And yet, she maintains her culture, the Texas accent, the way she lives her life, while adapting to a new environment. When she gets homesick in the Texas episode, the whole cast has to convince her to stay because, well, she's one of them now. I mean, it does sound like an immigrant story, whether it was intended or not. But they're not stopping there. Some people take all of this even further. And honestly, this one surprised me when I found out. In 2019, a University of Washington professor published an academic paper calling SpongeBob violent, racist, and insidious. Her argument was that Bikini Bottom, built on the site of Bikini Atoll, is a colonial fantasy. That the show essentially plants a cheerful, thriving cartoon civilization on top of land that was taken from indigenous Marshall Islands people who were displaced by American nuclear testing. And by making it fun and beloved, the show asks the audience to not think about what's actually underneath it. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that SpongeBob is secretly a colonialism simulator. That's a stretch. But the displacement happened. The nuclear testing happened, and Hillenburg himself confirmed Bikini Bottom sits under Bikini Atoll on purpose. Whether the show is complicit in something by existing there, or whether it's just a cartoon that happened to pick an evocative setting, that's a conversation people are genuinely having. So, at this point, you either think this is all nonsense, or you're getting uncomfortable because the evidence keeps stacking up. The people calling this woke propaganda aren't pulling things out of thin air. The question is, what is it actually? Okay, so before we call any of this propaganda, let's actually look at who made the show. Just in case you forgot, the guy who made this show was a marine biology teacher. He spent years teaching kids about ocean ecology and sea life at the Ocean Institute in California. He wrote an educational comic book about tide pool creatures to use in his class, which eventually became the foundation for SpongeBob. Then he left teaching to study animation, and his first real job in the industry was as creative director on Rocko's Modern Life. Now, if you've never seen Rocko's Modern Life, you should. But the relevant detail for this argument is that for the majority of the show, the villain of many, many episodes was greed and corporate culture. There's a lot of anti-consumerism and corporate satire baked into the storyline, and not to mention a satire about the way modern society chews people up. It gives us this unique understanding from the creative side of writing the show. Because you don't spend years making that kind of satire and then just leave it all behind when you start something new. That's not how a creative mind works. You will carry your influences with you whether you intend to or not. Which is why, when Mr. Krabs shows up, the greedy, exploitative crustacean that he is, I don't think that character came from nowhere. As for Squidward, well, if you've ever caught yourself sympathizing with Squidward more than SpongeBob as you've gotten older, it's because Squidward is us. He's the audience. He's the one watching this whole thing happen and quietly understanding that something is wrong. They knew exactly what they were doing with that character. So, is SpongeBob woke propaganda? Honestly, the answer is yes. Sort of. The people are not wrong about what they're seeing. They're just wrong about what it means. Because propaganda implies a deliberate effort to push specific beliefs into children disguised as entertainment. And when you trace every single one of these woke elements back to their source, that's not what you find. The anti-capitalism from Rocko, the environmentalism from a marine biologist, the tolerance comes from a guy who, when asked directly what his show was about, said the premise is that innocence prevail. And about the Bikini Atoll thing, that was always intentional. I mean, there's no machine here. There's only a marine biologist who liked the ocean, hated greed, and made a kid's show about a sponge who's nice to everyone. That's the whole conspiracy. But here's the part nobody making this argument actually wants to talk about. Being woke, in the original meaning of the word, before everybody on the internet broke it, just means being awake, aware, paying attention to what's happening around you instead of letting it slide past. And by that definition, SpongeBob has been making kids woke for 25 years. It taught a generation that a boss who fires you over a nickel is the bad guy. That a friend who makes jokes at your expense and hides behind, "I'm just kidding," is not good. That treating someone differently because they don't look or sound like you do is something you should notice. That the planet is getting warmer because people in charge of money decided it should. It taught us all that by making a show about a sponge flipping burgers. And it didn't tell us what to think, it just trained us to notice things, which is what smart kids shows are supposed to do. So if that's what woke propaganda means, I think we should have more of that. We watched it, most of us loved it, a lot of us grew up and turned out fine. Some of us probably turned out better than fine, and I think the show had something to do with it. Which makes me think the problem was never really SpongeBob. It's just a cartoon made by a person with a conscience. And apparently that's controversial enough. You don't expect to use the word terrifying when you're talking about SpongeBob. Sure, the show slips in dark jokes now and then.
He made me provide excellent service.
They wanted you to have this.
But at the end of the day, this is still a kid's show. Surely there's always a limit, right? Except there's one episode where that limit breaks. So terrifying, the plot itself doesn't even feel natural for SpongeBob. For a weird reason, too. For a few minutes, it's like you're watching a horror episode, masked as comedy for kids. That episode? It's Demolition Doofus. The episode opens up so mundane, you'd never guess where it's headed. SpongeBob helped Squidward to farm his carrot unintentionally. He also said,
"You wish me luck, Squidward, I don't need it."
Apparently he's feeling lucky today. Of course, that's just another way to say he's ready to fail his driving test again in the most creative way possible. And he doesn't disappoint. Within seconds, he floors the boat, hits other cars, and sends Mrs. Puff flying into the lighthouse tower. I've seen this bit more times than I care to count. So normally this would just be another slapstick farce, right? She puffs up, sighs, maybe gets wheeled off to the hospital, and we all laugh. But not this time. When we get to the hospital, the doctor walks in and delivers a line that sets the whole episode in motion.
I'm afraid you'll never puff again.
And just like that, Mrs. Puff loses the one thing that defines her. It's played as a joke, but if you actually think about it, this is a permanent disability. Her name is literally Mrs. Puff, and now she can't puff.
From now on, I guess we'll have to call you Mrs. Pop.
What? You're making fun of a freshly disabled person? Read the room, goddammit. Also, from here on, the story takes a sharp turn, because SpongeBob somehow doesn't see this as a tragedy. Even after Mrs. Pop jumped on him and practically choked his nose, SpongeBob just doesn't get it.
Sheesh, I don't know what she's so upset about.
He's still determined to keep practicing. He wants more lessons, and I guess he still wants his license. So he kept visiting her, kept bringing tulips that she is clearly allergic to, and keeps giving her a nice stroll in hopes that she would get better soon. Suddenly, the hospital was in an emergency situation. There's lots of injured, buffed guys coming in, but apparently it's a weekly thing. The doctor said that those guys are this week's casualties from the Demolition Derby, where lots of buffed guys crash into each other with their monster cars. It's like a Twisted Metal event, I guess? And so Mrs. Puff gets a little flicker in her eyes, and suddenly she gets an idea. Yeah, she wants SpongeBob to enter the Demolition Derby, in hopes that SpongeBob could get killed in the process. That thought alone shifts the entire vibe for this episode. Usually Mrs. Puff gets mad at SpongeBob, yells, maybe tries to trick him out of class. But here, she wants to put him in a life-threatening situation just to watch him get gone for good. And of course, SpongeBob entered the events without any objection. He believes that this was supposed to be a mere extra credit session, just like the No Free Rides episode.
Extra credit!
So we cut to the arena. This crowd is roaring. Metal cars circle like sharks, and SpongeBob is dead center, smiling, not even knowing what this is all about. Meanwhile, Mrs. Puff is on the sidelines, eagerly watching and practically begging the universe to destroy him. Except, SpongeBob doesn't get destroyed, not even close. Because as we all know, SpongeBob plot armor is just too strong. Every car that crashes into him ends up wrecked, flipped, or launched into the sky, while SpongeBob comes out unscathed. It's like the universe itself refuses to punish him. And the more SpongeBob thrives, the more unhinged Mrs. Puff becomes.
Why are you still alive?
By the end, SpongeBob single-handedly wins the derby. The crowd is cheering for SpongeBob, and Mrs. Puff is left disappointed once again. But just when I thought this was the entire joke, no. The episode still has one final moment for us, something we didn't expect. Mrs. Puff decides to take the matter into her own hands and tries to kill SpongeBob herself. So she brought out the big car, crushed both walls of the stadium along with some of the crowd. And in the most SpongeBob-fashioned way, she also ends up destroying her boating school in the process.
Puff, it's you! And you're all puffy again.
How? Just, forget about it. And in the end, SpongeBob is still alive, still clueless, still happy. And Mrs. Puff, even though she's recovered, she's the one left broken, accepting her sad fate in the rubble. So that wasn't just another boating school meltdown. We just watched a teacher plan her student's death, smile through it, and try again when the universe said no. But as crazy as that sounds, I'm giving it some thought. I kinda understand Mrs. Puff's feeling to some extent. I'm not saying it's justified though, because sadly, as we all know, this episode didn't come out of nowhere. It's the end point of a joke the show has been telling for years, until they went too far. In order to understand it perfectly, we'll have to track back and see how Mrs. Puff got pushed to the edge, and why Demolition Doofus decided to tip into terrifying horror. Mrs. Puff wasn't always like this. In fact, her first few episodes painted her as something completely different. Professional, patient, and almost a maternal character. She sighs a lot, sure, but at her core, she was still a teacher who cared about her students. The running joke is that she's stuck in the classic miserable teacher role. A problematic student, a boring class, endless stress, but she shows up anyway, because that's what teachers do, right? She's taking the job seriously because she still believes she can help, which is really noble for her. And for a while, that's the rhythm. Episodes like Hall Monitor or Procrastination put her in the background as the weary instructor, sighing through the chaos but sticking to her role. She even takes the blame sometimes for SpongeBob's disasters.
You know this guy?
Of course I do. I'm the one who gave him the uniform in the first place. He's my responsibility.
But then something unexpected happens. We get no free rides. This is the first time they decide to go over the top with the plot. Exhausted after another endless test, Mrs. Puff actually passes SpongeBob just to get rid of him.
Well, the rest doesn't matter. You pass.
It's nice to see SpongeBob finally get that driver's license. We're finally going somewhere with the plot, until she immediately panics and spends the whole episode trying to steal the boat back before he destroys the town.
Mrs. Puff?
This episode nails a bitter truth. Her ethics bend under pressure. Under that tired smile, she's one step away from committing a crime for peace of mind. And no, she doesn't stop with these themes. In fact, it only gets darker from here. Doing time throws her in prison for SpongeBob's chaos. She serves the sentence the student should have faced. Mrs. Puff, You're Fired takes it further. She's scapegoated, replaced by a drill sergeant instructor, blamed for a student she clearly can't control. It's a sharp satire of how institutions punish teachers for impossible students, which also eats away at her sanity. Then Summer Job rubs salt in the wound. She's forced to work at the Krusty Krab alongside SpongeBob to pay off damages. Headset on, dead inside. Even worse, Bumper to Bumper gives her one last honest try. New method, new mindset, but the second SpongeBob walks in, you can see her nervous system short out. She's just traumatic now. Leading up to this point, Mrs. Puff has been consistently the burnt-out adult, chained to be responsible for whatever damage SpongeBob caused that week. All of this stress builds into Demolition Doofus. She's just had enough of it, sick of it. She's fantasized about getting rid of SpongeBob for 13 years, and finally takes steps to make it happen. So yes, when I said I kinda understand her feelings, this is what I meant. How do you not resent someone who's wrecked your career, your reputation, and your body, and never seems to feel guilty? Ironically, that's also the line this show crosses in the first place, and why it feels so terrifying. Because in SpongeBob, everything usually resets. The city rebuilds, the plot snaps back to normal, and nobody remembers the damage. But Mrs. Puff's misery doesn't reset, for whatever reason. Her bitterness piles up over the seasons. I mean, we had Demolition Doofus coming from miles away, right? Just think about the setup. A teacher who's been beaten down for years and forced to take responsibility for her idiot student. She sees the person responsible smiling like nothing happened. Never take the blame, never gets punished for it. This time, she loses the one thing that defines her, or worse, getting disabled by it. And because over the years, she has tried so many things and failed miserably, this time, she plans to get rid of him for good. That's a solid revenge horror plot, guys. And the scariest part is that the villain here isn't some supernatural force or outside monster, it's Mrs. Puff, the school boating teacher, the person who, in every other cartoon, is supposed to keep the chaos from going too far. She takes a student who trusts her, who's excited about extra credit, and feeds him to a demolition derby for her own satisfaction. And ironically, SpongeBob is too innocent to realize that the one person meant to protect him has become the threat. While we could say that SpongeBob will be fine at the end, since his plot armor is so strong, and the fact is, no main character is ever truly dead or gets killed in the show. In fact, that reason only makes this episode feel obnoxious and kinda hard to watch. We know for sure no one's gonna die in this episode, so every time those contestants go to hurt SpongeBob, we just know that he will win by some stupid wizardry. Why even bother watching all the jokes? I absolutely understand why fans still argue about this episode. Some hate it because it feels too cruel. Some say it goes too far, that it stops being funny and just feels wrong. But I feel this episode is terrible terrible because the writers purposely made this episode. I guess they had enough of this Mrs. Puff being tolerant and patient as a character, and after all those running gags, they decide to make Mrs. Puff let out her anger. But you know for sure it's not going to work, right? Mrs. Puff's murderous intent is not a joke to be laughed at. And is it somewhat justified? Like, what can you do? You become disabled by one of your students' shenanigans. It's only natural to want revenge, right? Again, I'm making my statement clear here. I'm not justifying what Mrs. Puff does here, but anyone who's worked as a teacher or a nurse or a parent or in any role where you're responsible for someone who just won't listen, it's dreadful. The endless cycle of mistakes, the blame shifting onto you, the exhaustion that builds until even the thought of showing up makes your stomach turn. When the thought crosses your mind that maybe the problem isn't solvable and maybe the only way out of it is the problem disappears. Luckily, most of us don't act on those thoughts, but Mrs. Puff does. In the end, the Derby feels more like a horror movie stage. SpongeBob is standing in for every kid who's ever dependent on an adult, and then an adult secretly resents them. And now the most terrifying part, despite his age, SpongeBob is too innocent, too naive to realize his teacher is plotting against him, which makes the horror land on us, the audience. We see the grin, we hear the murderous intent.
I guess you have to demolish them yourself.
We know exactly what she wants, and we can't do anything. Depression doesn't always come with a sad song or poetic speech. Sometimes it just sounds like this.
I just can't seem to get happy.
And if you've ever had a night like that, laying in bed, not tired, not sleeping, just existing, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. As kids, we thought this was just another Squidward episode, another grumpy day in Bikini Bottom, same old, same old. But now that we're older...
Grievances! This town is a grievance! There should be a law against so many stuck-up tightwads living in one place!
That anger doesn't feel like a punchline anymore. He feels like someone you know, maybe even you. And the weirdest part, some of the episodes that used to seem weird now feel kind of tragic. These two in particular. They're not memorable because they're funny, because somehow, in a show about sea creatures and talking sponges, they nailed what depression actually feels like. And nowhere is that feeling more obvious than in this episode. It starts with a simple question. SpongeBob's flipping through a book at work, smiling like he just found his old yearbook, except it's not that. It's the Krusty Krab shift schedule. And he goes, "This book has all my happiest memories." Right there, you already feel the difference. SpongeBob finds joy in everything. Work, routine, Tuesdays, it doesn't matter. He'll find a reason to smile. So when he turns to Squidward and asks, "What's your happiest memory?" Squidward freezes. He blinks, tries to answer, but nothing comes up. Not a single moment. Not one spark. Just static. It's played for laughs, but underneath, that's dreadful. A man who can't name a single time he felt genuinely happy? It's the kind of moment you don't think much of as a kid. But now, it hits differently. Because it's one of the only times Squidward really admits it. He's not okay.
You're right, SpongeBob. I don't have a happiest memory. This is horrible.
And every time Squidward gets close to peace, something breaks it. He can't even enjoy the things he loves without getting hurt. After that, the art museum, and this one almost works. One of Squidward's sculptures is on display. People are admiring it. You can see it in his face. He's shocked, then proud, then actually glowing. He's having a rare moment of recognition.
I think this might be it.
Your happiest memory?
But just as quickly, it's taken from him. A performance artist named Fiasco burns it down with a flamethrower, and the crowd applauds him instead. That's a gut punch. It's the fear of being overlooked, of giving the world something vulnerable only to be mocked for it. And it only gets worse. SpongeBob takes Squidward up in a hot air balloon, blindfolded, for a surprise. Except Squidward's terrified of heights. So SpongeBob pops the balloon midair to help, and they crash into the top of Mount Bikini. A hiker actually tells them they're the first to conquer the top of the mountain. SpongeBob stabs the flag into Squid's foot and they both snowball to the ground. What was supposed to be magical ends in disaster. Again. And this moment seals it. Squidward doesn't just fail to enjoy these experiences, he feels worse for having tried. He comes home broken, physically and emotionally, then shuts the door, crawls into bed, and hits us with the nail in the coffin. So, he disappears for 2 weeks. This part changes the whole episode. Squidward doesn't just get sad, he goes silent. No work, no movement, no interaction. He shuts the world out completely, like he's gone numb from the inside out. SpongeBob tries everything. Window visits, phone calls, fax machine hijinks, but nothing gets through. Coffee doesn't help, baking cookies goes burnt, even the famous rope joke for hanging a clam doesn't help. And then the package arrives. Inside is SpongeBob, of course. He drags Squidward to the Krusty Krab for a surprise party, except no one came. So instead, it's just 100 paper maches of SpongeBob's smiling, staring. It's a nightmare in gift wrap. Squidward snaps. He destroys everything. He rips through the fake smiles, claws down decorations, swings from the ceiling, rages like he's finally allowed to scream. And in that mess, he smiles. For the first time in the entire episode.
It's my happiest memory!
And SpongeBob? He's thrilled. Because as messed up as it all was, Squidward finally felt something. But really, that's the darkest part. Squidward's happiest moment came not from joy, but from destruction. There's something really sad about this episode that you don't notice right away. It's not that Squidward's depressed, we've seen that before. It shows what it looks like when someone tries and fails to feel anything at all. Because what's actually brutal about this episode is that Squidward wants to be happy. He doesn't fight SpongeBob at first. He even says, okay, let's try. Sadly, no matter what they do, every spark dies before it can light. But maybe the real reason this episode hits as hard as it does is because it's not just about Squidward. It's about you, me, all of us who ever sat alone in a room, lights off, phone on silent, not because we're resting, but because we can't deal with anything else. The world keeps spinning, everyone's posting smiles, and you just can't. Can't find a reason to be excited, can't find a memory that actually makes you feel anything. Or maybe it's someone close to you, someone who's been quiet lately, always tired. Someone who jokes about not having good memories like it's nothing, but it's not nothing. And that's what makes this episode so uncomfortable when you watch it as an adult, because you realize Squidward isn't overreacting. He's just broken in a way that no one could see. SpongeBob definitely means well, but his way of helping says everything. He thinks happiness is a party, a memory, something loud and bright. So when nothing works, he builds a room full of fake friends and forces a celebration. But to Squidward, that's not comfort, it's a nightmare. Because not everyone heals the same way. Some people need space, others need presence. But almost no one gets better by being forced to be happy. And look, no one in this episode says the word depression, but that's kind of the point. Real depression doesn't always come with a label, or a sad montage. Sometimes it just looks like this. And when Squidward finally explodes, that's relief. Because when you've been stuck in that numb fog for weeks, sometimes even anger is a sign that you're alive. Even destruction feels better than the quiet nothing. And SpongeBob? He's so excited, because to him, it worked. Squidward's smiling. But for Squidward, nothing changed. So yeah, this episode isn't just a weird, hated SpongeBob episode. It's a mirror for how sadness actually works when it's not cinematic, when it's just existing without feeling. And if that feels familiar, if you've ever been there, then you already know. Squidward wasn't being dramatic. He was just tired. But if you thought Are You Happy Now was a one-off, it was not. Squidward's pain doesn't just come overnight. That same quiet spiral already plays out way earlier in the show. Except this time, he gets exactly what he says he wants, but still ends up miserable. Squidville starts with something we've all fantasized about, getting away and starting over. SpongeBob and Patrick are in full chaos mode, reef blowers in hand, destroying Squidward's house like it's just another Tuesday. So after one too many sponge-powered disasters, Squidward snaps. He doesn't just want space, he wants out. Out of his house, out of Conch Street, out of the chaos that's constantly humiliating him. And he says it himself, not in a joke, but in a breakdown.
I would rather tear out my brainstem and skip rope with it and go on living where I do now.
So when an ad for Tentacle Acres appears, it's not just a plot line, it's a lifeline. It's that voice in your head saying, if I could just get out of here, away from these people, this job, this noise, maybe then I'll be okay. So he moves to Tentacle Acres, and at first, it's everything he's ever wanted. There's no SpongeBob, no Patrick, just cycling, canned bread, interpretive dance, and clarinet quartets. Peace, routine, predictability. But here's where it gets brilliant, and a little terrifying. The same perfect routine starts to repeat. Day after day, loop after loop, the music gets distorted, the visuals grow stiff. Squidward starts to wither, not because anything bad happens, but because nothing happens. And Squidward, who thought all he needed was peace and quiet, starts to crack. This is where the episode shifts from escapism to existentialism, because you realize maybe Squidward never hated SpongeBob because he was annoying, maybe he hated him because SpongeBob felt something. Because he cared. Because in a way, SpongeBob's chaos had meaning, and Tentacle Acres doesn't. And that's how it starts. The itch, the urge to feel something again. The moment that reef blower appears, the symbol of everything he ran from, he can't resist. He plays with it like a child, laughs for the first time in days. And the neighbors? They hate it. They treat him the exact way he used to treat SpongeBob. So, what does Squidward do? Launches himself into the sky, screaming, That's the gut punch, isn't it? Not just that he leaves Tentacle Acres, but that he chooses chaos over numbness. Because even if it's messy, at least it's real. Squidville isn't just a silly episode about Squidward moving to a fancy neighborhood. It's a portrait of escapism, thinking, if I just change my surroundings, maybe I'll finally be okay. And in a way, that's the most adult lie we tell ourselves. New job, new city, new people, the blank slate fantasy. But the truth hits harder than anything SpongeBob ever threw at him. Squidward doesn't just crave peace, he craves purpose. And in a town built for people exactly like him, he loses all sense of it. Because the issue was never SpongeBob or Patrick, it was never about the chaos. The real issue was something he never packed, but brought with him anyway, his emptiness. And that's when you realize Squidward didn't need silence, he needed meaning. How many of us have thought the solution to our sadness was just a new location, a clean break? And many of us moved cities, changed careers, walked out of friendships thinking, this time it'll be different. And maybe it was, for a while, but eventually the silence sets in, the loop begins, and you start to wonder, was it the people? Or was it just me? But luckily, Squidward doesn't become a villain. He doesn't destroy Tentacle Acres, he doesn't become a Joker. He just launches himself out of it, screaming like someone who finally remembered what being alive feels like. It's dramatic, yeah, but it's also kind of perfect, because sometimes the thing you thought you needed most is the thing that was quietly killing you. And maybe that's the point we've been circling this whole time. Squidward doesn't just want to be happy, he wants to feel something that lasts. So he tries what most of us try. A happy memory, a new neighborhood, a clean slate, but none of it works. He's isolated, misunderstood, trapped between chaos he can't control and silence that feels like it's swallowing him whole. And in both episodes, what finally cracks through the sadness is raw emotion. Whether it's rage from destroying 100 SpongeBobs or joy from playing with a reef blower like a kid again, it's not about being better, it's about being real. Because the truth is, Squidward doesn't need to be fixed, he just needs to be seen. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. What if Squidward was never the miserable one? What if he was just the only one seeing things clearly? The only one who notices how fake everything feels, how loud happiness has to be, how exhausting it is to keep smiling when you're not okay. And in a world that expects you to be SpongeBob every day, sometimes the most honest thing you can do is scream. You ever notice how Squidward never really changes? Episodes reset, status quo returns, but Squidward, he's still there. Same house, same job, same pain. The grumpy neighbor we used to mock is now the mirror we didn't ask for. A lot of us grew up thinking we were SpongeBob, but somewhere along the way, we turned into Squidward. And maybe these episodes aren't here to make us laugh anymore. Maybe they're here to let us know if you're feeling like Squidward, you're not the only one. And if a cartoon octopus can survive that kind of sadness, you surely can too. So yeah, these episodes, They don't just show depression, they teach us. Not in some dramatic, very special episode kind of way, but through Squidward. Because sometimes the loudest cry for help sounds like clarinet practice. And that's what makes these episodes so special. They get it, even if we didn't realize it at the time.
Go watch the one I did on what if Krabs had actually asked Plankton to join him at the Krusty Krab. Same show, same writer's room even, but a completely different set of choices. And it's honestly wild watching how far 3 small decisions can drag the whole timeline. If tonight was about the show forgetting what it already tried, that one's about what it never tried at all. I'll see you on the next dive.